Chapter 2586. Wu Dingzi was blasted away by the sword. This was because he had set up 10 barriers. Otherwise, he would have been pierced by Yi Shiwen's sword. His hundreds of feet tall body fell to the ground like a heavy cannon. Cracks appeared on his body that was made of law talismans. This attack could be said to be a heavy blow, a complete heavy blow. Wu Dingzi's eyes were filled with disbelief and horror. After merging with martial arts incarnation, Yi Shiwen's strength was incomparable. Although he had also merged with martial arts incarnation, the gap between the two did not shrink. Instead, it widened, showing a gap of several times. On the other side, Wu Ziyu had already rushed over. He could not hold back anymore. He wanted to take advantage of the battle between Yi Shiwen and Wu Dingzi to find trouble with Yi Shiwen. He wanted to take advantage of the situation to kill Wu Dingzi. Who knew Yi Shiwen would be so terrifying? With just one attack, he severely injured Wu Dingzi and sent him flying. Finishing him off so quickly was completely out of his expectation. He had no other choice. The stone sword in his hand directly transformed into a huge world and fiercely smashed down, intending to hack Yi Shiwen to death. A pair of demon wings suddenly appeared behind Yi Shiwen. The demon wings wrapped his entire body in it. Bang! There was a loud collision sound, and that huge stone world smashed onto the devil's wings, setting off endless waves, but it couldn't hurt Yi Shiwen in the slightest. Wu Ziyu quickly retreated. Wu Dingzi's fate had reminded him what would happen if he was slow. Even so, it was still too late, because in the next moment, Yi Shiwen was already in front of him. His speed was so fast that it left an afterimage in the void. At this moment, Wu Ziyu finally understood Wu Dingzi's feelings. This Yi Shiwen speed was really ridiculously fast. In his eyes, he was actually dragging behind an afterimage. In the end, how fast was his true speed? He used all his strength to raise the stone sword and fought with Yi Shiwen. Clang! A huge force was transmitted from the stone sword. He actually felt like he could not hold the stone sword in his hand. He trembled completely. The web between his thumb and index finger was cracked, but he was already numb from the shock. His entire body was sent flying. Although he was in a much better state than Wu Dingzi, he was still in a sorry state. If the two of them had joined hands to fight Yi Shiwen before the fusion of the martial arts incarnation, then it was completely impossible now. The two of them had joined hands, but Yi Shiwen had defeated them one by one. It wasn't because they didn't join hands, but because Yi Shiwen's speed was too fast. So, it had created an illusion that they had been defeated one by one. All of this happened in an instant. In just an instant, the two of them were severely injured. How could he be so strong? Countless people sucked in a breath of cold air. Previously, everyone had thought that even if Yi Shiwen was strong, it would be very rare for him to be able to fight against two opponents by himself. However, Yi Shiwen had used the facts to show them how wrong they were. Just as he had said before, he hadn't shown his true strength at all. But now, he had only shown his true strength, and the two of them had joined hands, yet they were so vulnerable. At this moment, everyone seemed to recall that above Yi Shiwen's head was the title of the current generation's #1. Initially, they didn't really take this title seriously. But now, they had to reevaluate Yi Shiwen's strength. In the fierce wind, Yi Shiwen held the long sword in his hand. His expression was incomparably cold. Shwa! His figure suddenly disappeared. Both Wu Dingzi and Wu Ziyu suddenly became nervous. They were also afraid of Yi Shiwen's means. He was simply a monster. He was fast, ruthless, and powerful. When he appeared again, he was in front of Wu Ziyu. The sword in his hand was already within 10 feet of Wu Ziyu. Wu Dingzi actually felt relieved, although he was very clear that this was only temporary. Even if Yi Shiwen dealt with Wu Ziyu first, he would still be dealt with next. But he still couldn't help but have such a feeling. It was simply a shame. Although he knew this, he still felt slightly relieved, but he still reacted immediately. He couldn't let Yi Shiwen behead Wu Ziyu. Otherwise, they wouldn't be in a good position. He immediately flew out like an arrow and instantly pounced towards Yi Shiwen to kill. At this moment, Wu Ziyu was shocked and angry. He was forced to retreat by Yi Shiwen. The stone sword in his hand constantly slashed out astonishing stone chi, trying to impede Yi Shiwen's forward speed. But the long sword in Yi Shiwen's hand instantly cut through the space. Not to mention the stone chi, it couldn't stop his forward speed at all. Boom! Yi Shiwen's sword directly blasted into Wu Ziyu's body. The stone armor on Wu Ziyu's body instantly collapsed. He was not Yi Shiwen's opponent at all. The remaining sword chi directly rushed into Wu Ziyu's body. Puff! Wu Ziyu spurted out a mouthful of blood, his body flying out like a meteor. But Yi Shiwen didn't intend to let him go. He didn't spare him. He rushed out like an arrow, his body dragging an afterimage, directly rushed above Wu Ziyu. The sword intention in his hand burst into an astonishing light, fiercely chopping down. Seeing that Yi Shiwen was about to kill him, Wu Ziyu went crazy and roared like a wild beast. Jun Dingtian, you still haven't come out? If I die, don't even think about living. My brother will avenge me. Wu Ziyu roared. Instantly, everyone was shocked. There was actually a hidden master of this generation who had yet to come out. Jun Dingtian. This name was not unfamiliar to everyone. The Hidden Valley's Gemini star. One referred to the current number 1, Yi Shiwen, and the other referred to Jun Dingtian. Today, Jun Dingtian actually participated in the operation to kill Yi Shiwen. If that was the case, then everything would be interesting. One must know that this generation of Hidden Valley had 2 top-notch geniuses, which was an extraordinary thing. Many sects often only had 1 in a generation, and some didn't even have 1. They who had 2 in one go naturally became the focus of everyone's attention. Originally, there were rumors that the 2 did not get along, but everyone thought that it was just a normal bad relationship. It was normal for 2 geniuses to have a bad relationship. If they had a good relationship, then it would be abnormal. From the moment Wu Ziyu appeared, everyone understood that it was not just about the spring and autumn brush, but someone had set up a trap for Yi Shiwen. At first, they thought that it was Wu Ziyu who was in charge. After all, the hatred between Wu Ziyu and Yi Shiwen was known to everyone. But now it seemed that it was not entirely the case. It actually involved another Hidden Valley's Gemini star, and it was actually related to Jun Dingtian. If that was the case, then it would be a big deal. There was internal strife in the Hidden Valley, and it wasn't just a simple internal strife. Jun Dingtian had actually participated in the siege of Yi Shiwen. This would be a huge collision for the higher-ups of the Hidden Valley. No matter which side it was, there were many supporters behind them, and there was no lack of king-rank powerhouses among them. It was not easy for a good seedling to appear, and now they were directly fighting each other. This was something that the higher-ups of any force would not allow. If ordinary disciples were to die in a fight, then so be it. With the strength of the Hidden Valley, they could recruit a group of disciples at any time. However, when it came to disciples at the level of Yi Shiwen and Jun Dingtian, it could be said that it was rare to encounter them in tens of thousands of years. No matter which one of them was lost, it would be an unbearable loss for them. In other words, both of them were highly likely to be king-ranked in the future. At that point, the strength of the Hidden Valley would increase a lot out of thin air. Losing any one of them was unbearable. Although others such as the young Kuan Peng were also in the ranks of the priority training, they were still relatively young. Compared to these 2, who had already grown up, there was still some disparity. In the indefinite spirit cult, many people were very happy. Anyway, it was not their indefinite spirit cult that was having internal strife. Moreover, Wu Dingzi and Wu Ziyu were being suppressed by Yi Shiwen alone. It was a great humiliation. Now there was another one, and it was one of their own in the Hidden Valley. It was just the right time to watch them fight each other. However, all of this was just what the crowd thought. In fact, the situation changed faster than they imagined. Even when Jun Dingtian's name was shouted, Yi Shiwen did not stop at all. As if he had already expected it, he slashed down with his sword. Boom! An incomparably huge roar resounded. Yi Shiwen's sword had blasted Wu Ziyu's entire body into pieces. Without the protection of the stone armor, his entire body was completely vulnerable compared to the current Yi Shiwen. He still had a little bit of vitality left in him, and he struggled to reassemble in midair. However, He saw Yi Shiwen waving a flag and swallowing the flesh and blood that filled the sky on the spot. Ah! The entire sky was filled with Wu Ziyu's screams, which made everyone's hair stand on end. Just as everyone was still speculating, a shocking change occurred. An astonishing sword intent slashed through the sky at an extremely fast speed. It swept across like lightning and directly slashed down. Its target was Yi Shiwen, who had just killed Wu Ziyu. Seeing that Yi Shiwen was about to be pierced by the sword, Yi Shiwen finally reacted at this critical moment and met the attack with his sword. Clang! Two sword intents exploded in the air, and the terrifying force set off made everyone retreat in fear. I haven't seen you for so many years, and you haven't made any progress. Yi Shiwen chuckled and said indifferently. In front of him, a figure slowly emerged. It was none other than Jun Dingtian. Chapter 2587. Jun Dingtian slowly appeared, but everyone was still in shock. Wu Ziyu was dead. He was really dead. He died in the hands of Yi Shiwen in front of everyone. Everyone could imagine that once the outside world got wind of this news, there would be an immediate uproar. Wu Ziyu alone might be insignificant, but he was involved with another peerless genius, Wu Zimo. Wu Ziyu and Wu Zimo had an extremely good relationship, as Wu Zimo was much older than Wu Ziyu. Rather than saying that they were brothers in a certain sense, the saying that an elder brother was like a father was definitely true. There was a great grudge between the two sides. Now that Wu Ziyu had died in the hands of Yi Shiwen, Wu Zimo would definitely not let it go. He would probably come and kill the Hidden Valley immediately. This would probably be another earth-shattering collision. Then, everyone's attention finally shifted from the dead Wu Ziyu to Jun Dingtian. The battle between the two peerless geniuses of the Hidden Valley was a gimmick that attracted everyone's attention. Is Yi Shiwen going to fight Jun Dingtian in the end? It is said that they have fought before, and Yi Shiwen won. Now that Jun Dingtian is going to fight again, I'm afraid he has complete confidence. Jun Dingtian has been famous these years. He has defeated countless masters, but Yi Shiwen has been known as the strongest person in the present age for hundreds of years. He has even defeated Jun Dingtian before. From the looks of it, I'm afraid there is only a 50-50 chance of winning. You have grown a lot since before, Jun Dingtian said coldly. He stood with his hands behind his back, exuding incomparable confidence. Your cultivation has improved in a short period of time. It must be because you have swallowed my light essence. Yes, that's right. Yi Shiwen did not deny it and directly admitted it on the spot. Jun Dingtian's face twitched. Thinking of the light essence, his face turned ugly on the spot. It was a slap to his face. He had spent a lot of effort to buy the light essence, but it was snatched by Yi Shiwen. Not only that, it had also helped him improve his strength. The thought of it made him extremely depressed. But it doesn't matter. You will soon pay for what you have done. Do you think it is that easy to swallow my source of light? Jun Dingtian said angrily. Humph, don't look for excuses. Do you really not know why I stole your source of light? You arranged for people to surround me and almost caused me to fail the heavenly tribulation. Just one source of light is not enough to make up for this hatred. Moreover, you caused my family to break up with my wife. Now, I will settle this debt with you, Yi Shiwen said bluntly. He didn't want to shoulder the responsibility and was standing on the moral high ground. Jun Dingtian's facial expression changed. He knew that Yi Shiwen had seen through his plan. His idea was simple. He wanted to push all the blame onto Yi Shiwen and spread the reason why he wanted to kill Yi Shiwen with the help of the crowd. He wouldn't need a reason to kill anyone else. However, Yi Shiwen couldn't. Yi Shiwen's status in the Hidden Valley wasn't inferior to his. Therefore, those old fogies and old men would come looking for trouble even if he killed Yi Shiwen, if he didn't have a good reason to kill Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen didn't want to accept it. Obviously, he was aware of the trap. It was more likely that he had the same idea. He also needed a reason to find a good reason for this matter. In other words, Yi Shiwen also wanted to kill Jun Dingtian. He didn't panic when he was attacked. Jun Dingtian immediately thought deeper. Could it be that Yi Shiwen had been aware of his existence? Could it be that Yi Shiwen had been enduring and acting as if he didn't exist, waiting for him to make the first move? Sometimes it didn't matter who made the first move. However, under the watchful eyes of so many people, who made the first move was incomparably important. Whoever made the first move would fall into a disadvantageous position. In the future, it would also give others an excuse to cause trouble for them. Although one of them was dead, the remaining one would inevitably become a seed that would be nurtured and wouldn't be able to do anything to them. It would still be a stain. Thinking of this, the killing intent in his eyes continued to rise crazily. If that was the case, he had really underestimated Yi Shiwen. No, it should be said that he had completely underestimated Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen's mind was so ruthless. Cut the crap. You should know what will happen to you today. It's not too late to kneel down and be my slave. Jun Dingtian said. He had fallen into a moral disadvantage. It was useless to say anything else. As long as he killed Yi Shiwen, it would be enough to offset all the unfavorable factors. Kneel down and be your slave? Ha! I think you've lost your mind. Yi Shiwen sneered. He didn't take Jun Dingtian's words seriously. At the same time, he didn't think that Jun Dingtian was crazy. This was a psychological attack. If he had the slightest thought of retreating, his momentum would be completely destroyed. Naturally, he wouldn't be moved. I've defeated you twice. This time, you won't be so lucky to escape again. Yi Shiwen returned the favor quietly, trying to shake Jun Dingtian's will. However, Jun Dingtian was obviously not affected by the previous two failures. His will had reached a terrifying level. Whether it was failure or success, it couldn't shake his will at all. This kind of person's will was the most terrifying, because it was difficult to have decadent thoughts. Therefore, their achievements were limitless. Yi Shiwen also belonged to this kind of person. Although Wu Ziyu was arrogant at the moment, it seemed that he had a bright future. In fact, compared to Jun Dingtian, he wasn't even worthy to carry shoes. In Yi Shiwen's mind, the threat of Jun Dingtian was even greater than the threat of Wu Zimo. A person with such great talent and indomitable spirit would only be a great disaster if he were to be left alive. Most importantly, there had been rumors that Jun Dingtian was the reincarnation of a god. But now, it seemed that it wasn't as simple as the reincarnation of a god. Yi Shiwen even speculated that it was likely that he was the reincarnation of a divine king. Back then, the Lord of Darkness had died in the abyss of death. The Lord of Darkness was already a top figure at the peak of the Sage Realm. He was the #1 general under the Lord of Death, but he died without being able to fight back. The person who killed him was most likely Jun Dingtian's previous life. For such a powerful figure, as he grew stronger and closer to the strength of his previous life, the power he could unleash would also increase. Furthermore, with the cultivation of 2 lives added onto his body, it was easy to imagine how powerful he would be. It would be difficult to find a match among his peers. However, no matter what, the grudge that had been entangled for 2,000 years was finally going to be resolved. Yi Shiwen, you don't have to try to shake my determination with these words. I can tell you that it's impossible. Jun Dingtian said coldly. A sword suddenly appeared in his hand, exuding endless sword principle and forming a kingdom of sword principle. Heaven and earth suddenly shattered, and there were countless changes that belonged to sword principle. Compared to more than 1,000 years ago, Jun Dingtian's understanding of sword principle had reached a level that could shock the world and make the gods weep. Just by standing there, he was like a peerless sword that was unsheathed and revealed its unparalleled sharpness. Whoosh! Jun Dingtian's sword slashed down. At first glance, there seemed to be no change, but in Yi Shiwen's eyes, there were endless changes. This sword could change according to Yi Shiwen's changes at any time. Compared to Wu Ziyu, who used to control the stone sword, it was much stronger. Wu Ziyu mostly practiced the martial arts of the stone Dao. Swordsmanship was just a supplementary cultivation. But Jun Dingtian was different. His swordsmanship was ridiculously strong. He also understood the many changes of swordsmanship. In terms of swordsmanship, he might even be above Yi Shiwen. After all, Yi Shiwen's cultivation was very diverse. It was normal that his understanding of swordsmanship was not as good as Jun Dingtian's. Yi Shiwen even suspected that Jun Dingtian was most likely the reincarnation of a Sword King. Although he didn't know how Jun Dingtian escaped and finally reincarnated, it was still terrifying enough. Whoosh! The stone sword actually appeared in Yi Shiwen's hand. Just now, when Wu Ziyu was beheaded by him, the stone sword also fell into Yi Shiwen's hand. The stone sword was a natural magic weapon, produced by the spiritual energy of heaven and earth, not acquired. It was an innate spiritual treasure with amazing power, but in Wu Ziyu's hand, it couldn't exert its full power. Clang! Under Yi Shiwen's control, the stone sword directly collided with the sword in Jun Dingtian's hand. No matter how many changes Jun Dingtian made, Yi Shiwen only used one sword to cut everything. His fighting strategy didn't change from before. The stone energy spread in an instant. Yi Shiwen had actually completed the preliminary refining of the stone sword. After the sky-splitting sword was broken, Yi Shiwen didn't have a convenient instrument, and now it was the right time to make use of the stone sword. While they were talking, Yi Shiwen had already completed the initial refinement of the sword in the stone. With his current strength, it was not difficult for him to refine a top-grade divine tool. Even an innate spiritual treasure was no exception. Moreover, as he completely refined the sword in the stone in the future, he would have a deeper understanding of the stone Dao. It would be much easier for him to defeat Wu Zimo. As the saying goes, know yourself and know your enemy, and you will emerge victorious in every battle. This is the stone sword. You've actually completed the initial refinements so quickly. Your strength is even stronger than I had expected. Jun Dingtian seemed to be praising Yi Shiwen, but his hand didn't slow down at all, and he slashed again. Chapter 2588. Jun Dingtian's sword came crashing down, and the sword will was everywhere, forming a terrifying storm of swordsmanship that struck at Yi Shiwen. Do you think you can leave today if you haven't made enough progress all these years? Yi Shiwen sneered and waved the stone sword in his hand. The Dominator's sword will gushed out. The sword will surged. Both of them were masters of swordsmanship. Jun Dingtian's swordsmanship was stronger than Yi Shiwen's, but Yi Shiwen's Dominator's sword was more overbearing. He was going to dominate the world, whether his opponent was willing or not. For a moment, the collision between the two seemed to be equally matched. Rumble! The collision between the two collided, and the overflowing shock waves blasted out in all directions. Everyone couldn't help but be terrified, because the battle between the two seemed to be on a higher level than when Yi Shiwen fought Wu Dingzi and Wu Ziyu. What made everyone more terrified was not Jun Dingtian's terrifying strength, but that Yi Shiwen hadn't shown his true strength. If it wasn't for Jun Dingtian, he probably wouldn't have shown his true strength. At that moment, in everyone's eyes, Yi Shiwen was full of mystery. It seemed that no one knew where Yi Shiwen's true strength lay. No matter how strong his opponent was, Yi Shiwen always seemed to be stronger than his opponent. Such destructive power. Is it really only at the late stage of the Sage Realm? Wu Dingzi, who was recuperating, and Yan Bai, who was commanding the Book Mountain, were completely shocked because only the two of them were in the late stage of the Sage Realm. Therefore, they were very clear about how much strength one could have in this realm, and the strength that Yi Shiwen and Jun Dingtian possessed seemed to have surpassed this realm. Yan Bai was still fine. He had already seen how Yi Shiwen had killed the withered old man. It was almost a one-sided slaughter. However, Yi Shiwen's opponents after that were Wu Dingzi and Wu Ziyu, who were masters in the later stages of the Sage Realm. It made him almost forget how Yi Shiwen had killed a master at the pinnacle of the Sage Realm. Wu Dingzi, on the other hand, was completely shocked. His face turned even uglier because the strength displayed by both Yi Shiwen and Jun Dingtian seemed to be far superior to his own strength. Even Wu Dingzi's martial arts incarnation could not be compared to Yi Shiwen and Jun Dingtian. Every time he thought that he had explored Yi Shiwen's bottom line, Yi Shiwen would use practical actions to ruthlessly slap him in the face, hitting him until he was dizzy. What he couldn't accept was not losing to Yi Shiwen. but he felt that the gap between him and the top figures of this generation had widened. Whether it was Yi Shiwen or Jun Dingtian, the strength they displayed seemed to be above him. It would have been fine if it was just one person, but now that both of them were like this, didn't this mean that he had already fallen behind the first group? This was the most unacceptable thing to him, and it was even more painful than killing him. He had always thought highly of himself and regarded himself as the world's first-class genius. But now, he realized that he had fallen behind. There were always many excuses for him to fall behind those monstrous geniuses. However, there was no excuse for him to fall behind Jun Dingtian and Yi Shiwen. It should be known that the cultivation time of these two people was not even a fraction of his, and it was such people who completely surpassed him. Just thinking about it made him feel extremely uncomfortable. He looked at the two people in the battle with uncertainty in his eyes, thinking of all kinds of schemes. It would not be easy to catch up or even surpass them. Yi Shiwen and Jun Dingtian looked at each other in surprise. In the battle just now, neither of them had given the other any leeway to hold back. Both of them had tried to kill each other directly. They had thought that they could kill each other in one move. Who would have thought that the other party had displayed such extraordinary strength and couldn't even take him down? Both of them had a higher evaluation of each other, and the murderous intent in their hearts grew stronger. Bang! 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 In an instant, both sides had collided thousands of times, and each time was more intense and terrifying than the last. The battle between the two had surpassed the level of the late Sage realm. Jun Dingtian's sword aura was more intense than the last, and his 3,000 sword principles were fully displayed at this time. All kinds of sword aura alternated, and it made people flustered. This was because some sword chis were ruthless and decisive, while some sword chis were powerful and heavy. They were completely different. Therefore, when an ordinary person encountered this kind of sword Dao attack, they would completely collapse and be beaten into a mess in a short while. But Yi Shiwen did not care at all, and did not move at all. No matter what Jun Dingtian's sword will look like, his Dominator's sword will swept across, extremely overbearing. Two completely different ways of fighting. Jun Dingtian's swordsmanship was so complicated that one could almost find the shadow of all known swordsmanship in his swordsmanship. To be able to condense so many sword essences into his swordsmanship, it could be said that his understanding of swordsmanship had reached the pinnacle. If Jun Dingtian did not have the blessing of his past life, with his age, and without the plug-in of Yi Shiwen's mysterious space, it would be impossible for him to truly master the 3,000 sword principles in such a short time. So, it gave people a sense of complexity, but Yi Shiwen was different. He did not care about any sword techniques or sword wills, and only blasted out with simple means. One was extremely complex, and the other was extremely simple. Two extreme sword wills were displayed at the same time, but they had the same power, and it was hard to say which was better and which was more powerful. And this coincided with the way of heaven, and the 3,000 great ways could prove the great ways. The battle between the two was smooth, without the slightest delay. At the same time, it was extremely fast, and each move was fatal. Yi Shiwen's Dominator sword will was overbearing and invincible, while Jun Dingtian's sword will was ever-changing, and many kinds of sword wills were displayed one by one, and all of them were very terrifying. For a moment, both sides were in a stalemate. On the scene, even Yan Bai and Wu Dingzi could not determine who would win, because both sides had displayed amazing strength. These two people are indeed the twin stars of the Hidden Valley. The Hidden Valley was going to be rich, and either one of them could stand at the peak of the current generation, but now they are fighting each other. Perhaps the way of heaven can't bear to see such a perfect ending. Many people said to themselves, if these two people were harmonious and joined forces, it would be difficult to find a match in the same generation. But they were hostile to each other, and it was a situation where only one of them could survive. It seems that Yi Shiwen is stronger. Although Jun Dingtian's moves are ruthless and fatal, Yi Shiwen seems to have seen through the mystery of it. No matter how terrifying his opponent is, he can easily resolve it. Could it be that he has already understood the essence of Jun Dingtian's martial arts? Yan Bai could not help but murmur to himself. Although his eyesight was not good enough to follow the movements of the two, he could see some clues. Yi Shiwen seemed to be able to restrain Jun Dingtian's martial arts. Yi Shiwen, you have studied a lot of my 3,000 sword principles during this period of time. However, it is useless. My 3,000 sword principles are endless. You are too naive to think that you can learn it just by imitating it. Jun Dingtian sneered. Although he was under Yi Shiwen's control, he did not feel that it was anything. The same move, in the hands of different people, would have a world of difference in power. It would not be easy to figure out his true trump card. Those are just small tricks. Do you really think that I need to use such methods to defeat you? This time, I will let you die in a convincing manner. Yi Shiwen said faintly. On his body, the 5 Emperor's battle armor instantly appeared on the surface of his body, emitting the infinite power of the 5 elements. At the same time, the other martial arts incarnations on his body were all ignited and integrated into his body. Yi Shiwen's entire body had set off an unprecedented and earth-shattering frenzy. All the energy had been attracted to him, and had formed a powerful storm around his body. One couldn't see anything from afar. However, one could feel a kind of terrifying might in all directions from looking at it from afar. He is really hiding his strength. He really is hiding his strength, Wu Dingzi said while gritting his teeth. What made him feel even more humiliated was that Yi Shiwen did not show any signs of it before. In other words, Yi Shiwen felt that he did not need to use his full strength to deal with him, which was more humiliating than calling him trash. You despicable bastards, I will definitely make you die without a burial ground. Wu Dingzi gritted his teeth. At this moment, he hated Jun Dingtian. He vaguely felt that if it was not for Jun Dingtian, he would not have been so humiliated in front of everyone. Moreover, the two of them were from the same sect, and in his mind, they had become jackals of the same lair. They were both people that he hated the most. At this moment, not only Wu Dingzi but everyone else was also extremely shocked. How much power did Yi Shiwen have to hide before it was over? This time, he should have brought out his true power. Many people could tell that his power had even reached the pinnacle of the Sage Plane. It was an unimaginably powerful power. The peak of the Sage Realm was already a first-class expert in the Kurfürst Road, the strongest apart from the monstrous geniuses. Yi Shiwen had already reached this level, and he had only cultivated for a few years. How could this not be shocking? The corner of Yi Shiwen's mouth curled up slightly, and he suddenly stomped his feet. In an instant, infinite power spread out, and his entire body flew out in an instant, rushing to Jun Dingtian. Bang! Jun Dingtian seemed to have no time to resist at all, and was directly hit by the sword. His arms exploded and blood splattered. Chapter 2589. Jun Dingtian kept retreating. He suffered a great loss in the collision with Yi Shiwen. He was no match for Yi Shiwen and was severely injured in just one blow. Jun Dingtian just kept retreating. His eyes did not waver at all. It was as if the person whose arm had just exploded was not him, but someone else. On his body, 3,000 swordsmanship flew out and wrapped around him. Wherever the swordsmanship passed, Jun Dingtian's exploded arms were repaired and slowly replenished. The battle between the Hidden Valley twin stars seemed to have ended with Yi Shiwen having the upper hand. Yi Shiwen, who went all out, seriously injured Jun Dingtian with one blow. Such strength made many people shudder. Such ability had probably surpassed the late stage of the Sage Realm and reached the level of the legendary peak of the Sage Realm. How can he be so strong? He is not even in the late stage of the Sage Realm, but the power he exerted is comparable to that of the peak of the Sage Realm. Many people were horrified to find that Yi Shiwen's strength had exceeded the limits of their imagination. The peak of the Sage Realm was almost the limit of the old antiques in the Kurfürst Road. These two people are really more terrifying and fierce than the other. I've heard of some of the martial arts they used, and some I've never heard of. An old antique could not help but exclaim, Yi Shiwen, you really are an opponent that can't be underestimated. If I had underestimated you even a little bit, I would probably have died under your sword. Jun Dingtian's face showed some understanding. Yi Shiwen's outburst did not seem strange to him. It seemed that he had already expected it. Yi Shiwen's strength was needless to say. It was not difficult to infer from the previous battles, or from the powerful strength that Yi Shiwen had displayed hundreds of years ago. Go all out. If this is all you have, you will die in my hands sooner or later, Yi Shiwen said calmly. What? Jun Dingtian also hid his strength. Wu Dingzi's face was the ugliest. Originally, he did not take Jun Dingtian seriously. It was only because the alliance needed him. For him, a guy who had repeatedly lost to Yi Shiwen had no right to be arrogant in front of him. But now he knew how wrong he was. It wasn't that Jun Dingtian was too weak, but that Yi Shiwen was too strong. Even Jun Dingtian, who had been defeated time and time again, was more competitive than him. His previous arrogance seemed to be asking for humiliation. He was jumping up and down like a clown. Thinking of this, his eyes were filled with even more hatred. You saw through me? Jun Dingtian said coldly. I thought I wouldn't be able to use it, but I didn't expect that I would have to use it in the end. In Jun Dingtian's body, a strong force was released bit by bit. It was as if a terrifying beast was awakening in his body. It was extremely terrifying. Bit by bit, the power in his body broke free of the shackles and soon climbed to the pinnacle of the later stage of the Sage Plane. In the end, he reached the pinnacle of the Sage Plane in one go. Yi Shiwen did not take advantage of the situation to attack him, because he knew it would be meaningless. At most, he would make Jun Dingtian look a little embarrassed. After all, Jun Dingtian did not have a breakthrough in the midst of battle, but was just recovering. He could easily tell that Jun Dingtian had been hiding his strength because he had not held back in that attack. If Jun Dingtian had not stepped into the peak of the Sage Plane, that attack would have been enough to kill him. At the very least, it would have been enough to seriously injure him, and not just leave him like that. No wonder Jun Dingtian had the guts to go against him. It turned out that his strength had reached such a level that he was certain that Yi Shiwen could not be stronger than him. Jun Dingtian made a grabbing motion, and a long sword appeared in his hand. It flew across the sky and turned into a beam of sword aura that came crashing down. Around that shocking sword aura, 3,000 swordsmanship, like 3,000 shadows, covered the surroundings and slammed down on Yi Shiwen with shocking power. After so many years of grudges, it's all going to end today, Jun Dingtian roared, and his eyes flashed with a ruthless light. Speaking of which, it was absolutely impossible to say that Yi Shiwen had not affected him for so many years. It was precisely because he had such an opponent who hated his guts and kept chasing after him that he was able to recover his strength to this level in such a short time. But at the same time, he always wanted to kill Yi Shiwen. His sword aura had reached the pinnacle of the Sage Plane, and one more step, and he would be an expert in the King Plane. In the Kurfürst Road, Jun Dingtian could say that as long as he did not run into a monster, he could do whatever he wanted. Even if he did run into a monster, it would not be that easy to kill him. Come on! Yi Shiwen also let out a loud shout, and the stone sword in his hand burst out innumerable stony energies. Then, a golden magic power rushed out of his body and covered the surface of his body. Gilded Tyrant form was the real peak fighting strength. Under such circumstances, especially with the addition of the 5 Emperor's battle suit and martial arts incarnation, his strength had soared to the extreme. Slash! The stone sword was thrown out with a horrifying sword aura, which had the power to twist the entire vast sky, rushing towards Yi Shiwen. Rumble! In the air, the powers of both sides clashed madly. It was as if the battle from many years ago had been replayed. One side had 3,000 sword daos, and each sword chi was a brand new sword dao. It had already reached a terrifying level of complexity. On the other hand, Yi Shiwen's stone sword was extremely simple and simply smashed. That horrifying energy swept out and turned into countless huge explosions, forming a huge mushroom cloud, rising slowly. Roar! 2 incomparably loud whistling sounds rang out. Before the crowd could react, the 2 of them were fighting again. They were like 2 incomparably huge balls of light. The crowd could no longer see their movements clearly. Jun Dingtian flicked his finger, which turned into a sword. He pinched a sword art, weaving a monstrous sword net in the sky, covering the 9 heavens and 10 earths, as if it was the power of the sword principle that could destroy the world. Yi Shiwen was not to be outdone. No matter how many sword chis were chopping down, he just used the simplest trick, rotating his arms and constantly bombarding down, chopping down sword chis like a mountain, incomparably heavy. The changes of his sword principle were naturally not as much as Jun Dingtian's, but his sword principle cultivation was absolutely perfect. No matter what kind of attack, it could not shake his offensive. Boom! 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 As they got closer, the combat strength of both sides became more intense, and the collision became more intense. The two were close to each other, fighting hand to hand. Everyone around felt that the martial arts in their bodies were restless, especially the warriors who practiced sword principle. At this time, they felt that the sword principle was about to fly out of their bodies. This was the power of the 3,000 sword principles, and all sword principles would be affected by the 3,000 sword principles, all-encompassing and all-tolerant. Using ordinary sword principles to deal with the 3,000 sword principles was undoubtedly a suicidal approach. However, Yi Shiwen did not care, because he also had a deep understanding of the 3,000 sword principles. During the last battle, he had already comprehended the 3,000 sword principles to a certain extent. Although it was certainly not as good as Jun Dingtian, it was impossible for Jun Dingtian to use the 3,000 sword principles to affect his sword principle incarnation. Jun Dingtian frowned, and the battle was getting more and more intense, but he could see that both sides were completely in a stalemate. If this continued, his idea of killing Yi Shiwen would also become a bubble. Moreover, he had paid such a big price this time. If he could return alive this time, the big boss of the Hidden Valley would not let him go easily. After all, from the beginning to the end, Yi Shiwen was the one in the right. If Yi Shiwen died, then it would be a different story. If he died, then he would have died in vain. However, the current situation was that he couldn't do anything to Yi Shiwen. So, these problems that were originally not a problem would become a huge problem. Although he had already thought of retreating, Yi Shiwen did not have the same idea. It could be said that he was pressing forward step by step, and was approaching Jun Dingtian step by step. Yi Shiwen continued to attack, and in a short period of time, he had already switched from offense to defense. At this time, on the other side, Wu Dingzi's expression was ugly. He immediately made up his mind and shouted, "Go, let's go!" He had already seen that Jun Dingtian was at most in a stalemate with Yi Shiwen, and it was impossible for him to defeat Yi Shiwen. With Jun Dingtian's strength, he could escape unscathed. However, if it was him, the situation would be completely different. Once Gu Shiring obtained the spring and autumn brush, he would not be able to escape even if he wanted to. Under his control, Indefinite Sacred Mountain instantly turned into a stream of light and flew far away. As for Jun Dingtian, he had already been completely betrayed by him. He could not wait for the two of them to fight until both of them were injured, and it would be best if both of them died. Moreover, he had always remembered Jun Dingtian's previous actions of leaving his teammate to die. If Yi Shiwen had attacked him first, and not Wu Ziyu, then the one who would be dead now would be him. At this moment, there was no way he would be willing to save Jun Dingtian. Want to leave? Wu Dingzi, do you think this is a place where you can come and go as you please? All he heard was a cold voice, and then he saw the tip of a brush cutting through the void, falling directly onto Indefinite Sacred Mountain. Boom! The huge Indefinite Sacred Mountain exploded on the spot, and a terrifying force rushed into it. It could not be controlled at all, and exploded into pieces. Many disciples of Indefinite Sacred Mountain screamed and died tragically. Wu Dingzi instantly rushed out, but a figure immediately chased after him, not letting him go. Chapter 2590. A figure emerged from the ruins. It was none other than Gu Shiring. In his hand, there was a spring and autumn brush shining brightly. It was not the spring and autumn brush that he had refined in the past. This spring and autumn brush was undoubtedly much more powerful. The laws entwined on it were far beyond everyone's imagination. It faintly had a terrifying aura that suppressed everyone present. Everyone reacted immediately. This should be the spring and autumn brush in the ruins. Although they had thought about getting lucky, in the end, the spring and autumn brush still fell into Gu Shuring's hands. Sword come. Gu Shuring wrote the word sword. This was an ancient oracle bone script. It condensed in the void in an instant and slashed towards Wu Dingzi with infinite power. This word was like a real treasure sword. It transformed into countless sword auras and slashed down. Wu Dingzi roared and punched out. Indefinite elegy. However, his punch couldn't stop the sword chi at all, and it was instantly broken. The sword auras slashed directly on Wu Dingzi's body. Ah! Wu Dingzi screamed in pain. His body was badly mutilated and blood splattered everywhere. Gu Shuring, how dare you kill me? Wu Dingzi fled frantically. It was too dangerous here. Not only was Yi Shiwen in danger, but Gu Shuring was also in danger. Especially after obtaining the spring and autumn brush, Gu Shuring's strength could be said to have skyrocketed. Although she could not fully display the power of the spring and autumn brush, she could easily control it with the help of the same origin. It was more than enough to defeat Wu Dingzi. At this moment, Wu Dingzi was like a stray dog. There was no trace of the arrogance he had before. Everyone seemed to remember Wu Dingzi's arrogant and domineering appearance at the beginning. He did not care about anyone at all. Now, he was no match for everyone present. It was hard to say if he was even a match for Wu Ziyu. So what if I kill you? Gu Shuring's expression was ice cold. He was already filled with anger. It was clearly a Confucian instrument, but Wu Dingzi dared to snatch it. He did not care about him at all. If he had not asked Yi Shiwen to help, the spring and autumn brush would have fallen into the hands of others. How could he not be angry? It should be said that he was thoroughly enraged. Ancient oracle bone inscriptions formed in the sky. Sabers, spears, swords, and halberds all materialized and smashed down on Wu Dingzi. Wu Dingzi screamed miserably as he was no match for Lin Fan. He couldn't escape even if he wanted to. Not long after, Wu Dingzi was hit by the spring and autumn brush. His body was injected with boundless righteousness, causing him to explode and his soul to be destroyed. Everyone looked at Gu Shuring, who was in the sky, in fear. If Gu Shuring and Wu Dingzi could be said to be evenly matched before, now that she had obtained the spring and autumn brush, Gu Shuring's strength had suddenly surpassed Wu Dingzi's. He was almost in time to catch up with Yi Shiwen and Jun Dingtian. On the other side, the battle between Yi Shiwen and Jun Dingtian had reached its climax. Yi Shiwen kept attacking, and Jun Dingtian was in a difficult situation. But gradually, everyone realized that Yi Shiwen's power was gradually weakening. Just as they were wondering what was going on, they saw Jun Dingtian suddenly burst into laughter. If you had escaped, I might not have been able to do anything to you. But you chose to stay. Today will be the day of your death. You are only able to contend with me by relying on the power of the martial arts incarnation. When the power of the martial arts incarnation is exhausted, it will be the day of your death. Jun Dingtian might look battered, but he was extremely proud of himself now. Yi Shiwen, you are courting death. I might not have been able to do anything to you if you had run away. Everyone was shocked. Although the martial arts incarnation was powerful, it was not a long-term solution. Once the martial arts incarnation was exhausted, Yi Shiwen's strength would plummet. Do you think that's all I've got? I was just testing you just now. Now, I'll send you to hell. Yi Shiwen didn't take it seriously. Seeing that Jun Dingtian had no other tricks up his sleeves, Yi Shiwen finally used his true strength to defeat Jun Dingtian and secure the victory. The power within his body that had been restrained by the cultivation vest was completely released at this time, and it rolled out with a crashing sound. Everyone was shocked once again. Every time they thought they had seen Yi Shiwen's true bottom line, they would realize that Yi Shiwen's bottom line was far from the bottom. You're using a cultivation vest. Jun Dingtian's eyes were sharp, and he immediately recognized that Yi Shiwen was using a cultivation vest. He couldn't imagine what kind of willpower Yi Shiwen had used to fight with him while wearing a cultivation vest. It was because he knew about the cultivation vest that he knew how terrible it was. It was not that he had never seen people who used a cultivation vest. However, Yi Shiwen was wearing a cultivation vest and was still able to fight with him to this point. It was simply beyond his imagination. It was precisely because of this that he fell into Yi Shiwen's trap. He was completely sure that Yi Shiwen had no hidden strength. Otherwise, he wouldn't have continued to fight just now and would have escaped. Now, for the first time, he regretted it. He really regretted it. This was because this was a real battle. It was different from the mirage, where one could resurrect after dying. In this battle, if one died, one would die for real. More importantly, this time, no one would come to save him. At this moment, he seemed to finally understand why Yi Shiwen could hide until now. It was to wear down his strength, and at the same time, to dispel his vigilance. If Yi Shiwen had shown this kind of strength from the beginning, he would have escaped on the spot. Now, even if he saw that something was wrong, did he still have the ability to escape? Jun Dingtian looked at Yi Shiwen's handsome face. For the first time, he felt that Yi Shiwen's mind was as deep as water. Perhaps everything was under Yi Shiwen's control from the beginning. It was ridiculous that he even thought of killing Yi Shiwen. At this moment, Yi Shiwen entered a mysterious state. He abandoned other external Daos and only focused on swordsmanship. The power of the three martial arts incarnations were all added to the swordsmanship, allowing his strength to erupt to the extreme. In addition, the power that erupted from the cultivation vest was all condensed into the word sword above his head. This was not a simple word, but it carried all of his swordsmanship. At this moment, it seemed to enter eternity. At this moment, Jun Dingtian had been worn down by Yi Shiwen, but he would never sit and wait for death. His 3,000 swordsmanship was completely condensed at this moment, turning into a treasured sword. Countless swordsmanship principles were surging within it. Die! This treasured sword of his was the first to launch a counterattack against Yi Shiwen. He wanted to gain the upper hand by striking first. Jun Dingtian's body followed the sword. At this moment, he had completely integrated with his treasured sword and swordsmanship. He was no longer a living creature, but an incarnation of all the swordsmanship in the world. His 3,000 swordsmanship was almost all-encompassing. Shadows of all swordsmanship martial arts could be found in it. He was indeed qualified to do so. It was completely destroyed in the sword aura. Everyone could feel the horror of this sword intent. It could tear the sky and the earth apart. If they were to get close, they had no doubt that they would be torn into pieces. However, Yi Shiwen's expression did not change. His whole body had integrated with the word sword. The stone sword appeared in his hand and integrated with the word sword. You have been pursuing the ultimate swordsmanship all your life. Now, I will send you to heaven with swordsmanship. I think you will have no regrets. Yi Shiwen said calmly. In his heart, he had already grasped everything. No matter what Jun Dingtian did, he would not be able to turn things around. Booms! Yi Shiwen's sword aura collided with Jun Dingtian's swordsmanship. In an instant, there seemed to be a crisp sound. Jun Dingtian's 3,000 swordsmanship was directly annihilated by more than 1,000 swordsmanship. Jun Dingtian was about to cry tears of blood when he saw this scene. He did not know how long he had cultivated his 3,000 swordsmanship, but Yi Shiwen had taken back 1/3 of it. This was not like the void where one could be reborn after being destroyed. Here, being destroyed meant being destroyed. Even if he could escape today, his cultivation would plummet. He would not be able to fight against those evildoers. He might not even be able to keep his position as a first-class martial artist. In his eyes, Yi Shiwen's swordsmanship had no redeeming qualities. It should be said that Yi Shiwen's power was overwhelming. Yi Shiwen had crushed his swordsmanship with his tyrannical power. Therefore, he was not reconciled to it. In his opinion, he did not fail in swordsmanship. It was just that he had chosen the wrong time. He had no intention to continue fighting with Yi Shiwen. He turned his body again and turned into a giant sword. He cut open the space and wanted to escape. He naturally understood that where there is life, there is hope. He would be stupid if he continued to fight with Yi Shiwen. But Yi Shiwen would not give him the chance. After thousands of years, he was finally going to get rid of this big scourge. How could he let it go? Seeing that Jun Dingtian had entered the space, Yi Shiwen did not give up. The stone sword in his hand flew out and rushed into the space passage. In an instant, the entire space passage was petrified. Jun Dingtian's escape route was completely blocked. Yi Shiwen, I will kill you. Jun Dingtian saw that his escape route was blocked. Just as he was about to explode, the stone sword slashed down and cut him in half. His divine soul was destroyed. Chapter 2591. Yi Shiwen sheathed his sword and heaved a sigh of relief. He felt relieved. While he did not say it out loud, Jun Dingtian was indeed a thorn in his side. Compared to Jun Dingtian, no one else could have given him so much pressure. Furthermore, the feud between the two of them had gone on for too long. Jun Dingtian's talent was terrifying, and he might even have been the reincarnation of a divine king. With such an advantage, if Yi Shiwen were to slack off for even a moment and did not train properly for a while, he would be the one lying on the ground. At that moment, there were another 10 demon kings in the demon summoning flag that had truly entered the pinnacle of the sage plane. Even though they were slightly weaker than the average pinnacle of the sage plane, the combined power of the 10 demon kings was enough to instantly kill an average pinnacle of the sage plane. The demon summoning flag's power had increased by another level. This was all thanks to Jun Dingtian's blood essence. Normally, it would have been impossible for an average pinnacle of the sage plane to have such a huge amount of energy. At most, it would have only been enough for one demon king to evolve. However, Jun Dingtian was different. While they were at the same level, his qi and blood were vigorous, and his strength was several times that of others. On the plane, there was also an even larger amount of energy sealed within his body that had yet to fully explode. His own qi and blood alone had already allowed several demon kings that were at the pinnacle of the sage plane to break through to the pinnacle of the sage plane. However, there were even more monsters that were frantically devouring the energy within, especially the huge amount of energy that was still transforming. Yi Shiwen guessed that the huge amount of energy was probably Jun Dingtian's inheritance from his past life. It was likely a part of his powers from his past life. As such, Yi Shiwen had to constantly train and devour all sorts of treasures. On the other hand, Jun Dingtian only had to constantly refine the powers within his body, and it was enough for him to advance by leaps and bounds. Compared to Yi Shiwen, he was much faster. However, the energy that had yet to be refined was now Yi Shiwen's. All of it fell into his hands and was devoured by the demon summoning flag. Gu Shiring flew over from afar, the spring and autumn brush in his hand flashing continuously. The way he had forced Wu Dingzi to his death was truly awe-inspiring. While it was not as shocking as when Yi Shiwen had killed Jun Dingtian, there was no doubt that he had become much stronger compared to when they first met. Congratulations, Brother Gu. You've successfully subdued the spring and autumn brush. Yi Shiwen smiled as he put the stone sword back into his body. The sword in the stone was only a high-grade divine artifact, while the spring and autumn brush was a supreme-grade divine artifact. At the moment, there was no comparison. Gu Shiring couldn't help but smile. She was in a good mood. This is all thanks to the restriction left behind by Senior. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been so easy to retrieve the spring and autumn brush. Gu Shiring said. Even so, he had only refined the spring and autumn brush a little and could barely exert some of its power. Don't be fooled by the fact that he killed Wu Dingzi so easily. In fact, apart from the fact that Wu Dingzi didn't have a top-grade divine tool, more importantly, he was seriously injured by Yi Shiwen. Later on, he tried to escape, which allowed Gu Shiring to kill him easily. But no matter what, I still have to thank Brother Yi for helping me today. If it wasn't for Brother Yi, I'm afraid it would have been very difficult for me to walk out of here safely today. Gu Shiring solemnly said with a bow. He knew that if it wasn't for Yi Shiwen, Wu Dingzi wouldn't have killed him, but Wu Dingzi would have killed him. It's an alliance, after all. It's only natural for us to help each other. Yi Shiwen laughed. This time, he had obtained the Great Confucian Gall, and at the same time, he had killed a major threat. It was not a wasted trip. All of a sudden, Yi Shiwen noticed that there was a faintly discernible energy sweeping out from Gu Shiring's body. Congratulations, Brother Gu. I'm afraid you're not far from the pinnacle of the sage realm. Yi Shiwen congratulated him so abruptly that he almost missed it. It seemed that Gu Shiring had obtained more than just the spring and autumn brush. Ah, I really can't hide anything from Brother Yi. Indeed, apart from the spring and autumn brush, I also inherited some of that senior's skills. Gu Shiring said bluntly. He knew that even if he were to break into the pinnacle of the sage realm, he would at most be on par with Jun Dingtian. He would definitely not be a match for the current Yi Shiwen. Moreover, by then, Yi Shiwen would have consumed the Great Confucian Gall, and a breakthrough would be just around the corner. When that time came, Yan Bai would definitely not be a match for him. At this time, his mentality was completely balanced, because he no longer regarded himself and Yi Shiwen as a comparison target. If they were all geniuses, then Yi Shiwen was a monster. Such a monster. Didn't Ji Run Wang also exist in the previous tournament? There was no need to make himself feel bad over this. Yan Bai flew up alone. Today's battle had been full of twists and turns, and he was exhilarated. Brother Gu, finding the spring and autumn brush is definitely a great achievement. I'm afraid the position of headmaster will be yours. Yan Bai's face was also beaming with joy. He was not jealous at all. His relationship with Gu Shiring was the best. The two of them were even allies within the sect. If Gu Shiring reaped great benefits, he would naturally follow her to the heavens. All of this will depend on Brother Ye's help. Gu Shiring said. Now that the spring and autumn brush has been found, I wonder if Brother Yi plans to leave immediately? Yes. Yi Shiwen nodded. He was very clear that killing Jun Dingtian would cause a huge storm, and now it was time to welcome the baptism of the storm. But Brother Yi, I received news that many experts from the Battle Saint families are rushing over from outside the Kerfers Road. Gu Shiring reminded. If it were an ordinary person, hearing this, they would definitely be puzzled. What did it have to do with them that there were experts from the Battle Saint families rushing over from outside the Kerfers Road? But Yi Shiwen understood the meaning of Gu Shiring's words as soon as he heard it, because Zhang Yin had died in his hands, and a large number of experts from the Battle Saint families were rushing over from outside the Kerfers Road, probably for him. If there is a need, Brother Yi can go with us. I don't think the Battle Saint families would dare to do anything to us, Gu Shiring said aloud. Now that he had the spring and autumn brush in his hand, his confidence was greatly boosted. At the same time, it was also a subtle indication that he would stand on the same front as Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen smiled faintly. Don't worry at all. No matter how many of them come, they're just a bunch of chickens and dogs. The current him was not the same as before. Even if he encountered those evildoers, he was confident that he could escape unscathed. As long as they were not evildoers, who could do anything to him. Gu Shiring originally wanted to persuade him, but thinking of Yi Shiwen's invincible demeanor when he killed Jun Dingtian, he could only admit that these people seemed to be coming to die. Since this matter is over, I won't stay any longer. Yi Shiwen immediately said goodbye and said, I can't wait to see who is in such a hurry to die. Looking at Yi Shiwen's figure as he left, Gu Shiring couldn't help but murmur to himself, in this generation, it will be difficult to meet a worthy opponent. This is destined to be his stage. Will the grand occasion of the previous generation's Ji Renwang appear in this generation? Yes, even we are no match for him. Among those of the same generation, Yi Shiwen will be difficult to meet a worthy opponent. Yan Bai said with emotion. With Yi Shiwen's current cultivation, he had already returned to the entrance of the secret territory in less than a quarter of an hour. As soon as his figure appeared, all kinds of communication talismans suddenly flew all over the sky. These things could not be hidden from Yi Shiwen. He immediately knew. He didn't even need to open the Eye of Redemption. He could directly look around and see many spies hiding in the depths of the space. Among them were spies from the Battle Sage family, because they had their unique martial aura, and spies from other forces and individual masters. It seemed that they had all come because they had received some news. Yi Shiwen did not stop these spies from sending the communication talismans. He had already killed so many. He didn't mind killing more. Sure enough, the Battle Sage family did not let Yi Shiwen wait for long. A roar came from the sky. The sky began to fluctuate violently, like the surface of water. A spirit array that was originally set up in the sky blossomed with an astonishing light. Suddenly, a crack was torn open. In the pitch-black void, a group of dozens of martial artists stepped out from the other end of the void. With the help of the teleportation formation that was originally set up, these people almost arrived in a flash. Obviously, they had been waiting here for a while. The group of dozens of people turned out to be masters above the sage realm, and among them, an old man dressed in black was even at the peak of the sage realm. His momentum was oppressive, and every move he made was accompanied by amazing power, extremely powerful. The Battle Saint family is so generous. Dozens of experts at the peak of the sage realm, all the elites of the elites. They've actually sent all of them just to deal with Yi Shiwen. What's so strange about this? According to the news I received, the peerless genius that the Battle Sage family had cultivated for tens of thousands of years, Zhang Yin, seemed to have disappeared in the secret territory. But the last news that Zhang Yin sent out was that he wanted the people of the Battle Sage family to deal with Yi Shiwen. So many people speculated that Zhang Yan's death was likely related to Yi Shiwen. Guessing? Just guessing? Just speculation. And they sent so many masters. The Battle Sage family is too domineering. The Battle Sage family has always been domineering. Although they only have one king-level powerhouse, their ancestors' strength as a battle sage is well known even among the many king-level powerhouses. But since they are so domineering, the Hidden Valley will not let this go. When that time comes, there will be another big battle. No one knows how the Hidden Valley will react, but it's hard to say whether Yi Shiwen can escape from here alive now. Everyone had not yet received news from the secret territory, and they were still immersed in the news of Zhang Yan's disappearance. Chapter 2592. If they knew what had happened in the secret territory, then they would not be bothered by the disappearance of Zhang Yan and whether he was suspected to be dead. That was because it was meaningless at all, because in the secret territory, 3 of the top figures of the current generation had already fallen. If it was during normal times, the fall of any one of them would have caused an uproar, just like how Zhang Yan's disappearance had caused an endless uproar. But compared to the conflict that broke out in the secret territory, it was meaningless at all. I think I've seen the leader somewhere before. I suddenly remember. He seems to be a supreme elder of the Battle Sage family, Zhang Ge. Someone suddenly recalled the origins of these experts from the Battle Saint clans and was immediately shocked. Zhang Ge could be said to be a very senior expert in the Battle Sage family. Now that he had personally appeared here, one could imagine how important this matter was to him. I'm afraid that the Battle Sage family will really be furious with Zhang Yan's disappearance this time. But didn't they say that life and death in the Kerfus Road are fated? Why would the people from the Battle Sage family dare to take revenge so brazenly? You're still too naive. It's probably your first time coming to the Kerfus Road. Although it's said that life and death are fated, in fact, that's only for ordinary people. Geniuses at the level of Zhang Yan are often people that have been cultivated by a sect that has spent countless resources and countless years. The fall of such a person is definitely a big deal that will shake the world. That's right, he's right. Didn't the Flame Lord personally take action when the Hidden Valley's Kunping was captured? He uprooted the Cloud Ink City's lineage. This kind of revenge is actually a very long sword. However, generally speaking, they would only take action in private. It's rare for a Battle Sage family to take revenge on such a large scale. After all, the Battle Sage family's heritage is far inferior to that of the Hidden Valley. Losing Zhang Yin would directly cut off their lineage. The Hidden Valley has Yi Shiwen and Jun Dingtian. They're known as the Gemini Stars. Zhang Ge glanced at Yi Shiwen coldly. His eyes were extremely sharp. In his eyes, there seemed to be the birth and death of the universe. They were incomparably deep. His understanding of the heavenly way had already reached a shocking level, which was directly reflected in his eyes. Are you that audacious Yi Shiwen? Although he was asking a question, his tone was indeed very certain. His mind became active. Before this, he had received a message from Zhang Yan. Zhang Yin actually wanted him to eliminate this person called Yi Shiwen. Regardless of whether he had anything to do with Zhang Yan's matter or not, he had already made Zhang Yin fear him to such an extent. If Zhang Yin wanted him and the others to take action, he could not let Yi Shiwen survive. Zhang Yan's position in the Battle Saint clan was extremely high, and he was basically the next successor that was being groomed. Furthermore, they wanted to groom him into an invincible monster. All obstacles had to be swept away, and no one was allowed to stand in their way. Nonsense, you already know the answer, Yi Shiwen said snappily. Zhang Yin is really a good-for-nothing. When you can't beat him, you call your parents. Does he think he is a child? Cut the crap. You won't be able to escape today, even if you have wings. Zhang Ji's complexion changed, and he immediately stopped Yi Shiwen from continuing. Now that Zhang Yin was missing, he didn't have time to waste with Yi Shiwen. He had to kill Yi Shiwen first, and then look for Zhang Yin. Elder, what do we have to say to him? Let's just capture and kill him. At this time, an expert from the Battle Saint clan immediately stood up and said, secretly reminding Zhang Ge that if this continued, it was very likely that the experts from the Hidden Valley would also be attracted here. If that happened, it would be troublesome. That's right. You guys hurry up and do it. The sooner you die, the sooner you can reincarnate. Yi Shiwen suddenly smiled sinisterly. Go down and fight with Zhang Yin as soon as possible. What? Impossible. You're talking nonsense. You're courting death. These experts from the Battle Saint clan suddenly went crazy. They entered the Kurfürst Road with only one mission, and that was to find the missing Zhang Yin. Although they had some bad speculations in their hearts, they still firmly believed that Zhang Yin was still alive. To be specially selected and trained by the Battle Saint clan, one not only needed to have outstanding talent, but more importantly, one had to have a tough life and be able to kill his way out in a situation where heroes were fighting for supremacy. Warriors were a group of people who didn't believe in fate the most. There was only one goal in cultivation in this life, and that was to break free from the control of fate. However, they were also the most aware of how terrifying fate was. The long river of fate was affecting them all the time. Therefore, having a tough life and having a tough 8 characters was actually a more important factor for many sects to select disciples. If this person was born with bad luck and died wherever he went, then it would be a waste of time to train him further. Ordinary forces wouldn't be able to see this at all, but the level of the Battle Saint clan was naturally able to see through some things. Therefore, the excuse that they used to comfort themselves was that Zhang Yin had a tough life and would not die so easily. However, now that it had been exposed by Yi Shiwen, it completely shattered all their thoughts of getting lucky, and they instantly went crazy. Zhang Yin was actually dead. Actually dead. They couldn't imagine how much of a disturbance this news would cause among the Battle Saint clans, especially those who supported Zhang Yin wholeheartedly. They would probably go crazy in an instant. How dare you? Zhang Ge roared angrily. He couldn't control his aura at all, and it swept out in a frenzy all of a sudden. The power that belonged to the pinnacle of the Sage Plane directly spread out in all directions. Zhang Yan's disappearance was still within the bottom line of what they could accept. Even if he had been trapped in the secret plane, it would have been fine. However, they were completely unable to accept his direct death. Yi Shiwen sneered. Originally, he didn't intend to say it, lest the people from the Battle Saint clans pester him. However, the situation was very clear now. Regardless of whether he had anything to do with Zhang Yan's death or not, the people from the Battle Saint clans would not let him go. So, what difference did it make? Kill! The expert from the Battle Saint clans who stood out roared and attacked in anger. A divine weapon-long blade appeared in his hand, and he slashed at Yi Shiwen. The blade aura set off a terrifying wind wave, spreading to both sides, forming a huge belt of wind. Even the space was shattered by the blade, and it slashed at Yi Shiwen. Although he was not as strong as the Battle Song clan, he was still a top expert in the late stage of the Sage Plane. You're asking for it? Yi Shiwen sneered disdainfully. The stone sword had already appeared in his hand. He slashed the sword and released an inexhaustible amount of stone chi, which took the shape of a long dragon. Then, he launched a counterattack. The space was frozen into pieces of stone, and it swallowed the blade aura that was slashing down. What was even more terrifying was that the stone aura was pleasing to the eye. The blade aura spread out, and the expert from the Battle St. Clans did not even have time to dodge. The stone aura spread to his body, and he was completely turned into a stone statue without any ability to fight back. Boom! The stone statue exploded on the spot. The expert did not even have time to say anything before he died a horrible death. Everyone was shocked by the scene. Experts in the late stage of the Sage Plane were not cabbages, and there would be more after they were killed. They were the top elite experts of the regal canonization denomination. In the smaller immortal lineages, such existences were either sect leaders or invincible supreme elders. Now, he was killed by Yi Shiwen with one sword. This Yi Shiwen was a bit too fierce. Could that be the stone sword? Finally, someone recognized the sword in Yi Shiwen's hand, but what else could it be if not the stone sword? Suddenly, many people were even more confused. They knew very well what the stone sword meant, because in the Kurfürst Road, the only famous stone swords were Wu Ziyu and Wu Zimo. And in Yi Shiwen's hand was the stone sword in Wu Ziyu's hand. And Wu Ziyu's stone sword was his companion ritual implement. From the moment he was born, it had never left him. In other words, now that the stone sword had appeared in Yi Shiwen's hand, it meant that Wu Ziyu had probably also died. Thinking of this possibility, everyone felt their vision go dark. This time it was really going to be an earthquake. Zhang Yin died in Yi Shiwen's hands, and now even Wu Ziyu died in his hands. What happened in this secret plane? Why did two top experts with immeasurable futures die here? Once the news spread, the entire Kurfürst Road would probably be shaken. And what they didn't know was that apart from the two that they knew, Wu Dingzi and Jun Dingtian had also died in there. If they knew, they wouldn't be so surprised. Anyway, so many had died, it didn't matter if a few more died. You? Zhang Ji's eyes widened. He had some doubts and disbelief before. Perhaps he had thought that Yi Shiwen had deliberately said this to confuse their minds so that he and the others would have an opportunity to escape. But now he had completely believed it. What did he do to Wu Ziyu? Why didn't he dare to kill Zhang Yin? There was no benefit in admitting such a thing, because he would have to face the relentless pursuit of the Battle Sage family. In addition, Zhang Yin had disappeared for a few years, which was enough for them to determine the truth of this matter. We must kill him. Otherwise, how are we going to explain to the elder ancestor? Zhang Ge said while gritting his teeth. He was very clear about the elder ancestor Battle Sage's love for Zhang Yin. If he couldn't bring Yi Shiwen's head back, he would probably be implicated in this matter. In an instant, the experts of the Battle Sage family attacked one after another. Dozens of powerful martial arts torrents cut through the sky and blasted towards Yi Shiwen. Chapter 2593. The powerful force shook the heavens and the earth. The light covered the sky, and the power tore the earth apart. Many people looked at it from afar, and their faces turned pale. Dozens of powerful Sage Plane Masters attacked at the same time. The scene was shocking. Even though he was also a god, he was still shocked by this. At this moment, an astonishing sword light broke through the void and swept out. That seemingly unsolvable dreadful attack was annihilated by this sword light. It couldn't affect Yi Shiwen at all. Yi Shiwen's entire body was surrounded by terrifying fluctuations of sword yuan, just like boiling water, which formed a layer of protective film around his body. No matter how powerful these attacks were, they would never be able to break through it. Everyone from the Battle Sage clan was incomparably shocked. Although they hadn't used their trump cards yet, Yi Shiwen had broken their offensive with just one sword strike. How could they not be afraid of him? How long had it been? Yi Shiwen had become so strong in such a short period of time. He couldn't be mentioned in the same breath as the strength that Zhang Yin had been worried about when he had sent the news. At this moment, they had completely believed that Yi Shiwen had killed Zhang Yin. But they did not retreat. On the contrary, the murderous intent in their eyes became even more intense. Such a person's future was unimaginable. It would have been fine if they had not become enemies, but since they had, they would eliminate him at all costs. Kill him, We can't let him live. The experts of the Battle Sage clans stood in different positions and arranged a huge battle matrix. A battle matrix was formed in an instant and slowly rotated. Yi Shiwen clearly felt that the entire power of the heavens had been isolated. In this war, the experts of the Battle Sage clans were the heaven and the earth, and were capable of sweeping in all directions. Their divine kingdoms were connected, forming a world of their own. This was also an extremely powerful secret technique. It was rumored that the ancestor of the Battle Saint clan was originally an ordinary general in the mortal world, without any inheritance. There were many such generals in the mortal world, and without inheritance, it was impossible to cultivate to a high level. But the Battle Saint clan was able to cultivate from an ordinary general to the king level through many fortuitous encounters. It could not be said that they did not have many fortuitous encounters, and their own talents were unparalleled. According to a normal person's understanding, this was a main character template. Anyone who went against him would not have a good ending. Because a large part of a Battle Saint's cultivation was related to the battlefield, many of the Battle Saint clan's martial arts were related to the battlefield. This battle formation was also evolved from a battlefield formation. It was very impressive. The experts of the Battle Sage clans didn't even need to take action. They could rely on the power of the heavenly way to crush Yi Shiwen. Because of this, they didn't directly take action. Yi Shiwen closed his eyes, and the mysterious space inside his body started to revolve crazily. Although this battle formation is not bad, are you guys too useless? After a long time, Yi Shiwen suddenly opened his eyes, and a bright light flashed in his eyes. The stone sword appeared in his hand, and he grabbed it. Whoosh! An astonishing sword radiance burst out from the stone sword, swept across the sky, and bombarded a part of the battle formation in one fell swoop. Boom! The seemingly sturdy battle formation collapsed with a rumble. The experts of the Battle Sage clans were sent flying, as if they had suffered a heavy blow. Impossible! How could you find our formation core? Zhang Ge kept retreating, his eyes filled with disbelief. Among them, he had the most profound skills, so he was not directly sent flying, but he was still extremely shocked. The power of the matrix set up by dozens of experts of the Sage realm. In addition to him, an expert at the peak of the Sage realm. It went without saying that even if another expert at the peak of the Sage realm were to fall into it, it would only be a matter of time before he would be tortured to death. But Yi Shiwen could easily find the weakness of the battle formation, the formation core. Every matrix had its own formation core, which was also the core of the entire matrix. Once the formation core was broken, then no matter how powerful the matrix was, it would not be able to continue to be maintained. That was the law. Yi Shiwen had used the power of breaking the formation core to cause the heavenly power that was originally used by the Battle Sage clans to backfire on them, directly injuring them. He did not even need to do much to injure them. But how could they be unprepared when using this kind of battle formation? It was precisely because the formation core was the weakness of the battle formation that they had strengthened their defenses. Most importantly, the position of the formation core was definitely different every time, so it was impossible for anyone to find it. And Yi Shiwen had actually seen through the formation core. If he was not lucky, then there was only one possibility, and that was that he had already seen through the truth of the entire matrix. But this was even more unbelievable. Their battle formation was personally developed by their ancestors, and it could be said that it had been tested for a long time. They had never had the experience of being seen through in such a short time. Was this kid also a master of matrices? In an instant, his mind had thought of countless possibilities, and his constant deduction had almost become an instinctive action. But obviously, Yi Shiwen would not answer him. Instead, he waved his hands and flipped out a flag. He said to himself, Zhang Yin, back then you used this demon summoning flag to deal with me. You probably never thought that one day, the demon summoning flag would be used in the hands of your Battle Sage clans. That is, Zhang Ge immediately recognized that it was actually the demon summoning flag. He had a very deep impression of it. This time when the Emperor's Road was opened, the biggest goal of the Battle Sage clans was to successfully refine the demon summoning flag. As for the opportunity to become an emperor and so on, it was just empty talk. Firstly, this kind of thing had not been truly accomplished for many years since ancient times. Secondly, even if there was a so-called opportunity, with Zhang Yan's strength, it was not enough to challenge those monsters who had lived for hundreds of thousands of years, or even millions of years. For a monster like Jiren Wang, who could dominate the Emperor's Road the first time he entered it, it was rare to see one in a million years. Otherwise, he would not be so famous. Yes, it is the demon's summoning flag. To die in the hands of the demon's summoning flag, it is a worthy death, Yi Shiwen said with a faint smile. The masters of the Battle Sage clans had just managed to catch their breath from the counterattack. When they heard Yi Shiwen's words, they were so angry that smoke almost came out of their orifices. Damn it, it was a worthy death. They did not want to die. Don't worry, the demon summoning flag cannot be used continuously. Zhang Gu retreated again and again. Back then, he had also participated in the refining of the demon summoning flag, so he was very familiar with the demon summoning flag. And he judged that if the demon summoning flag could only be used once, then Yi Shiwen's target was likely to be himself, who had the highest cultivation among these people. As long as he was killed, the rest of them were nothing to worry about. At least, it would not be a problem for him to swagger away. From a normal point of view, his thinking was indeed correct. However, he was wrong about one thing, and that was that Yi Shiwen did not just want to escape. On the contrary, he still wanted to do something shocking. Humph! Yi Shiwen snorted softly and did not bother to explain. He waved the flag, and in an instant, the endless army of monsters that filled the sky surged out. At the front were 20 incredibly powerful demon kings at the peak of the Sage Plain. There were originally 10 powerful demon kings at the peak of the Sage Plain in the demon summoning flag, and now there were 10 more. It went without saying that the scene of 20 demon kings at the peak of the Sage Plain surging out was terrifying. Even though they were much weaker than the average Sage Plain at the peak of the Sage Plain, when there were 20 of them, it was enough to make up for the difference in quality. Behind them was a sea of monsters, and among them, there were many demon kings at the late stage of the Sage Plain. With so many monsters surging out, it almost scared the people who were watching from afar to death. How could this be? Even the people of the Battle Sage clans were scared to death. Seeing so many monsters, even a fool would know that they could be overwhelmed to death. Their first reaction was to escape, but it was useless. The monsters were too fast, and they were drowned in a short while. They had no time to dodge, and they were eaten alive by the 20 demon kings at the peak of the Sage Plain. And Zhang Gu also retreated as he fought. He thought of a terrifying guess, and that was that the demon summoning flag that the Battle Sage clan wanted to cultivate the most was actually completed in Yi Shiwen's hands. Thinking of this, he felt an incomparable fear. He knew very well how terrifying the demon summoning banner would be once it was refined. Because of this, the Battle Saint clans were willing to pay any price to successfully refine the demon summoning banner. Most importantly, the demon summoning banner's artifact spirit had to be successfully devoured. Now it seemed that Zhang Yan had not succeeded, but Yi Shiwen had. Or rather, Zhang Yan had completed half of it, but Yi Shiwen had reaped the fruits of his labor. All of these were possible. He didn't even think about it. He immediately turned around and fled. However, how could Yi Shiwen let him escape? He immediately caught up with him. The demon flag in his hand trembled, and a terrifying ray of light burst out, shooting straight toward Zhang Gu. Bang! Zhang Gu was hit directly, and there was no time for him to dodge. The terrifying power brought the invincible power of the sky and smashed down. Its power was something that even Yi Shiwen had been afraid of back then, let alone Zhang Gu now. After all, Yi Shiwen's cultivation was much stronger than Zhang Yan's, and he was like a fish in water when it came to controlling it. The power was also much stronger. The attack directly shattered the body of Zhang Gu, who was trying to escape. Then he still wanted to struggle, but he was swallowed by a demon king at the peak of the Sage Plain. His soul was immediately destroyed, and his spirit was destroyed. He could not be more dead. Chapter 2594. Although the experts of the Battle Sage clans were elites, they were still submerged in the face of hundreds of thousands, or even millions of demon beasts that were powerful enough to contend against the gods. Only a short period of time had passed since Yi Shiwen had released the demon flag, and they had been swallowed up by the demon beasts. After devouring dozens of masters of the Sage Realm, many of the monsters in the demon summoning banner had advanced again. Many of them had also advanced to the Sage Realm. Unfortunately for Yi Shiwen, none of them were able to evolve to the peak of the Sage Realm again. But what really shocked Yi Shiwen was that in such a short period of time, his magic power had been completely consumed. It should be known that his magic power was much more profound than that of ordinary people at the peak of the Sage Realm, and now it had been completely consumed in such a short period of time. The speed at which the demon flag absorbed magic power was too terrifying. To control so many monsters at the same time, it wasn't as simple as just releasing them. Each of them might only consume a bit of magic power, but when the number accumulated to such a degree, it would be very frightening. But the power of the demon summoning banner was also terrifying. It could be said that there were pros and cons. When Yi Shiwen's cultivation was more profound in the future, it should be enough to alleviate this problem. Fortunately, this was not the complete demon summoning banner. Otherwise, even with Yi Shiwen's current magic power, he would have been instantly sucked dry. That was a legendary ritual implement refined by the Demon Lord. And these masters of the Battle Saint clans had also contributed hundreds of billions of celestial source to Yi Shiwen's wealth. This wealth that they had accumulated over the years had now all fallen into Yi Shiwen's hands. After killing all the masters of the Battle Saint clans, Yi Shiwen did not stay for long. He left directly. The bystanders were already scared silly, and they did not dare to stop him. It took them a while to even send a message out before they finally reacted and had to send a message out. Sending Jun Dingtian to the west with a sword had caused a huge uproar in the Kerfus Road. Among the masters of the current generation, both Yi Shiwen and Jun Dingtian were very highly ranked, and they could be said to be famous. But in fact, the rumor that the two did not get along had been around for a long time. In addition, Yi Shiwen had caused trouble in Jun Dingtian's stronghold a few years ago, which made the conflict even more public. But no one would have thought that Jun Dingtian would actually die at the hands of Yi Shiwen. If either side killed the other, it would be a big deal. Compared to the matter of Hidden Valley Gemini Star's internal strife, Gu Shuring's killing of Wu Dingzi and Yi Shiwen's killing of Wu Ziyu were not so outstanding. At least, this was not the top priority of everyone's attention. This was just the beginning of a series of storms. For the outside world, this was merely gossip. However, for everyone in the Hidden Valley, this was simply a bombshell. Originally, it was not easy for two such figures to appear, and they were counting on them to make the Hidden Valley stand out on the Kerfus Road this time. In the end, they did not die in the hands of others, but in a fight between themselves. For many big shots, this was something that they could not accept at all. Apart from killing Jun Dingtian, he had also killed Wu Ziyu, Zhang Yin, and fed a large number of experts from the Battle Sage families to the monsters. At the same time, Wu Dingzi's death was also related to him. After everyone learned of Yi Shiwen's dazzling combat power during this period, they could not help but spit out one word: monster. Moreover, it was not as simple as just being strong. Through this matter, everyone also knew that Yi Shiwen was also cruel and merciless. It was really the rhythm of anyone who stood in his way would die. Moreover, there were all kinds of rumors flying around. Some people said that Yi Shiwen's combat power was already comparable to the peak of the Sage Realm, and some even said that Yi Shiwen could already torture and kill monsters. Of course, many people were dismissive of this. Torture and killing monsters? How was that possible? Therefore, many people did not quite believe that Yi Shiwen had the combat power of the peak of the Sage Realm. Instead, the truth was buried in all kinds of rumors. It was said that not only the Hidden Valley was furious, but even the Battle Sage families, the Indefinite God Cult, and Wu Ziyu's brother, Wu Zimo, were also furious and wanted an explanation from the Hidden Valley. Especially the Battle Sage families, in addition to losing a rare genius like Zhang Yin, they also lost dozens of tyrannical experts. Anyone who heard it would weep, and anyone who saw it would be heartbroken. It was as miserable as one could imagine. With so many experts lost in one battle, it could be said that the battle sage families had lost at least hundreds of thousands of years of accumulation. After all, experts of the sage realm were not cabbages that could be found everywhere. However, there were also many people who were watching the show and did not sympathize with them at all. If it was not for the battle sage families wanting to break the rules and send people to kill Yi Shiwen, they would not have suffered such a great loss. Many people secretly said that they did not know how the battle sage families could be so shameless to go to the hidden valley to cause trouble. If it were them, they would not be so shameless to go to the hidden valley to cause trouble. After experiencing the incident with the battle sage families, everyone was very clear that no matter how many ordinary experts were sent, it would be difficult to really hurt Yi Shiwen. Dozens of experts of the sage realm could be said to be a sect that had hundreds of thousands of years of accumulation. No one wanted their own experts to be killed, and at this time, Yi Shiwen was still in the Kerfus Road. Even if a battle sage wanted to personally kill Yi Shiwen, it was not possible. And now in the Kerfus Road, it seemed that the only people who could threaten Yi Shiwen were those unparalleled geniuses. For a time, all kinds of connections appeared. The indefinite god cult, the battle sage families, and so on were all contacting experts to eliminate Yi Shiwen in the Kerfus Road. And the battle sage families were very weak, and they did not have those kind of unparalleled geniuses. Zhang Yin was the first genius to be trained in this aspect, but it did not mean that there was no one among them who could threaten Yi Shiwen. After so many years of development, which sect did not have some old antiques that were so old that one could almost smell the smell of antiques? These antiques were terrifyingly strong, and they were not inferior to those geniuses. It was just that they had never been able to break through to the King Sage realm. Compared to those geniuses who could break through but were unwilling to, these antiques wanted to break through but were unable to. It was simply tragic. Over the years, there were indeed many geniuses who died in the hands of these antiques. Some psychopaths especially liked to torture and kill those geniuses to satisfy their twisted minds that were caused by their inability to break through. If this was not a problem, many people saw that Wu Zimo had already come out of his closed-door training and was rushing out angrily. It was very obvious that he had come to find trouble with Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen had killed him, so it would be strange if Wu Zimo could swallow his anger. Moreover, the number of experts who had been stirred up by this incident was far more than just these few. It could be said that Yi Shiwen had thoroughly stirred up countless storms. Several kings' sect had been shaken up by his matter. Facing the aggressiveness of these sects, the Hidden Valley did not pay any attention at all. That was because although the battle sage families, the indefinite god cult, and other sects had all died in this matter, they were not in the right. Their deaths in the Kerfus Road were in vain. Moreover, the Hidden Valley had also lost a genius. In terms of losses, was there anyone who was more aggrieved than the Hidden Valley? They could not care less about the outside world, but inside the Hidden Valley, it was like the calm before the eruption of a volcano. All kinds of news were flying around. This matter was too big, so big that none of the 7 lineages of the Hidden Valley could handle it alone. Even the powerhouses in the Hidden Valley were alarmed. It was said that a powerful old ancestor in the King realm had slammed the table and said that Yi Shiwen would be severely punished. Of course, everyone knew that he was the ancestor of this lineage of Jun Dingtian, and they hoped that Jun Dingtian could inherit his mantle. In the end, he died in the hands of his own people. How could they accept this? And Yi Shiwen had just left the secret territory when he received a message from the Flame Lord, asking him to go to a stronghold in the hidden valley of Supreme Unity Heaven to be questioned. Yi Shiwen knew that this day had finally come. From the moment he planned to eliminate Jun Dingtian, he had already foreseen this day would come. This was also a hurdle that he had to overcome. Fortunately, this matter was very obvious. Jun Dingtian had plotted against him, and he was just passively fighting back. At least that was how it seemed to outsiders. No one knew that he was also plotting against Jun Dingtian. Jun Dingtian had a backer, but didn't he have one too? Thinking of this, Yi Shiwen breathed a sigh of relief and immediately rushed to Supreme Unity Heaven. According to the location of the talisman, It was a small world. At the entrance of this small world, Yishuan unexpectedly found that the young Kuan Peng was also there. He was still in his original form and had yet to transform. Not everyone was willing to transform into a human form. When he saw Yishuan, he quickly stepped forward and said, "Big brother, you did well this time. Jun Dingtian is too sneaky. I was tricked by him several times." "He also attacked you?" Yishuan frowned and said, "Yes." The young Kuan Peng nodded vigorously. "But I didn't get any benefits. Now those old guys still want to cause trouble for you, big brother. They are simply blind. Despicable people like them should have died earlier," the young Kuan Peng said angrily. Yishuan looked up and down at the young Kuan Peng. He could immediately see that the young Kuan Peng's cultivation had improved compared to a few years ago. He had already reached the peak of the sage late stage. It was only a matter of time before he took another step and entered the peak of the sage late stage. At that time, with the bloodline and heritage of the Kuan Peng race, it would only be a matter of time before he entered the king stage. He would be much stronger than his mother. Let's not talk about this now. Those old guys have been waiting for a long time. I'll bring you in first. Chapter 2595. Yishuan leaped onto young Kuan Peng's head. If anyone were to see this, they would probably be scared to death. Young Kuan Peng was one of the top talents in the Hidden Valley. Although he was slightly inferior to Yishuan and Jun Dingtian, it was only a matter of time before he caught up to them. In the eyes of the big shots in the Hidden Valley, he was no less important than Yishuan and Jun Dingtian. Otherwise, the Lord of Flames wouldn't have come out personally because of young Kuan Peng's capture. Young Kuan Peng was usually very fierce and cold in the eyes of everyone. It was difficult to even get close to him, let alone step on his head. It was like a miracle, but Yishuan and young Kuan Peng didn't think much of it. Instead, they took it for granted. For them, this was indeed normal. Under young Kuan Peng's lead, they traveled as fast as lightning and entered the clouds of the small world. Above the clouds, 7 thrones towered above the clouds. On these 7 thrones, 7 figures with oppressive auras sat above the clouds. They were faintly discernible, but Yishuan couldn't see through them with his eyesight. He could only vaguely see some of them. But under such circumstances, Yishuan didn't dare to open the eye of redemption to observe. Otherwise, it wouldn't be fun if he angered these titled kings' powerhouses. Yishuan also knew that these shouldn't be the actual bodies of these titled kings' powerhouses. They should only be projections. If they dared to enter with their actual bodies, they would probably be devoured by the laws of the Curfirst Road and killed. Such a thing had been proven by many titled kings' powerhouses who didn't believe in heresy in the past. Especially after Emperor Qin attacked the Curfirst Road as a titled king powerhouse. Many titled kings' powerhouses didn't believe in heresy and followed him in. In the end, they were all turned into ashes. The facts prove that there was only one Emperor Qin. And behind these thrones, there were also many projections. They were all old monsters at the peak of the Sage Realm. They were also the backbone of the Hidden Valley. Even if they didn't come, they had sent their projections. And among these people, Yishuan also saw the Lord of Flames. He didn't enter with his actual body, but with a projection. When Yishuan looked at him, he saw him vaguely nodding his head. Yishuan immediately felt relieved. It seemed that it was just as he had guessed. Even the higher-ups had their own differences, and it was impossible for them to be united. Speaking of which, given his current cultivation and strength, he could definitely be considered as one of the higher-ups in the Hidden Valley. In particular, he had reached the stage where he could alarm those old monsters in the king-ranked realm. One could imagine his current status in the Hidden Valley. Yishuan, do you know your crime? Yishuan had just stabilized his footing when a virtual shadow suddenly appeared on the throne. It suddenly roared and said. Although Yishuan had never seen this person before, it was not difficult to guess that this person was the ancestor of the Jun Ding Tian bloodline, King Wu. Martial King Fortitude was a very senior figure in the Hidden Valley. He was one of the original trio that founded the Hidden Valley. At the same time, he was also one of the strongest kings in the Hidden Valley. However, Yi Shiwen did not panic. He just cupped his hands and said, "Junior has seen Marshal King Ding. I wonder what crime Junior has committed?" Yi Shiwen was not moved by Marshal King Ding's roar. "Humph. What crime have you committed? Is it a capital crime to kill a fellow disciple?" Marshal King Ding said coldly. There was a bone-chilling coldness in his words, which turned into a crushing aura. A king-rank powerhouse's words were the law. A casual sentence could cause great changes in the weather. "A capital crime?" Yi Shiwen nodded and said, "Since you know it's a capital crime, why don't you bow your head and wait to be executed?" Marshal King Ding seemed to be very satisfied with Yi Shiwen's tactfulness and said coldly, "That's why I killed Junding Tian." Yi Shiwen replied indifferently. He was not overwhelmed by Marshal King Ding's aura. Among the crowd, the Flame Lord had a smile on his face. As he had expected, if Yi Shiwen was a person who would obediently surrender, then he would have misjudged him. Sure enough, Yi Shiwen was not a person who would surrender without a fight. Marshal King Ding was almost choked by Yi Shiwen's words. As you all know, Junding Tian, Wu Dingzi, and Wu Ziyu worked together to set up a trap to kill me. This can be said to be framing a fellow disciple. As you said, it's a capital crime, Yi Shiwen said proudly. He did not back down just because the other party was a king-rank powerhouse. Howell said, colluding with outsiders to frame a fellow disciple is a death sentence. Another forthright voice was heard. Yi Shiwen raised his head to look and saw that it had manifested. It was a golden-winged rock, and it was soaring in high spirits. Golden-winged Rock King. Yi Shiwen finally knew why young Kuan Prung did not want to transform into a human. With such a master teaching him, it was inevitable that he would be affected. Sure enough, if Marshal King Ding Tian was not happy with him, then Golden-Winged Rock King would stand on his side because of young Kuan Prung. Marshal King Ding. Although Junding Tian is indeed a rare talent, there are countless geniuses in this world. What we are most afraid of is a greedy and ungrateful person. Junding Tian first instigated others to cause trouble when Yi Shiwen was in seclusion, and then he colluded with outsiders to frame a fellow disciple when Yi Shiwen entered the secret territory. Such a person will die no matter where he goes. Am I right? Golden-Winged Rock King said with a smile. Marshal King Fortitude snorted coldly with a livid expression. He was speechless at the Golden Rock King's words. Of course, he would say that because he had an even better talent than him, an invincible genius who could walk the Emperor's road. In fact, in the Hidden Valley, the one who was really favored was neither Yi Shiwen nor Junding Tian, but young Kuan Prung. Whether it was Yi Shiwen or Junding Tian, in everyone's eyes, they were both likely to enter the King Realm and become a big shot in the Hidden Valley in the future. However, young Kuan Prung was an existence that had a chance to enter the Emperor Realm. However, he was a pure-blooded descendant of Kuan Prung, which gave people great hope. Whether the Hidden Valley could go further in the future, from an ordinary King Realm sect to a sect that had an Emperor Realm inheritance, and become a colossus that was on par with Ancient Phoenix Realm Martial Sect and Dragon Island, all depended on young Kuan Prung. Therefore, Golden-Winged Rock King was extremely proud of his disciple. At least in the eyes of most people, they might be equal now. But in the future, young Kuan Prung's future would undoubtedly be much brighter than others. Therefore, in Marshal King Ding Tian's heart, it was easy for Golden-Winged Rock King to talk. If young Kuan Prung was killed, who knew how furious he would be? Marshal King Ding Tian and Golden-Winged Rock King were the main speakers now. No one else came forward to say anything. Yi Shiwen looked at the situation and immediately understood. Among the 7 kings, he should belong to Flame Burst King, who belonged to the Flame Lord. Flame Burst King was also one of the 3 most senior people in the Hidden Valley. He was also very strong, but it was not convenient for him to stand up for Yi Shiwen now. After all, although Junding Tian was in the wrong, Marshal King Ding Tian had experienced the pain of losing his disciple. He must be given a chance to vent. If Flame Burst King stood up and said something, it would inevitably lead to a fierce confrontation between the 2 sides. But Yi Shiwen was not in the wrong. Moreover, even if he was in the wrong, he could not continue to punish him. After all, he was the only one left in the hidden Valley Gemini star. Would those who were not killed by others die in his hands? Therefore, Jun Dingtian's plan from the beginning was very accurate. He had grasped the thoughts of those big shots. Unfortunately, he was not Yi Shiwen's opponent in the end and was killed instead. Therefore, the only one who could stand up now was the master of young Kun Peng, Golden-Winged Rock King, who was on good terms with Yi Shiwen. Everyone was very clear about these things. Therefore, even those who could enter the Kerfurst Road only came in their projection avatars. They did not have the intention to come as their main force. They must have seen through these things. Martial King Ding Tian snorted coldly. He did not pay attention to Golden-Winged Rock King at all. He just stared at Yi Shiwen fiercely. Yi Shiwen did not dodge. He held his head high and looked at Martial King Ding Tian. Yi Shiwen, even if he schemed against you, can't you capture him and bring him back? He might just be confused for a moment. If you discipline him properly, it might be possible to teach him well. Martial King Ding Tian said while gritting his teeth. Senior, the situation is urgent. Jun Dingtian's strength is very tyrannical. I have no room to hold back. In a battle, swords and spears have no eyes. It is normal for anything to happen. Yi Shiwen said lightly. Martial King Ding Tian almost slapped Yi Shiwen to death. Yi Shiwen did not even blink when he lied. According to the information he received, it was clear that Yi Shiwen had the absolute advantage. Jun Dingtian was completely unable to fight back. Wasn't it a lie to say that swords and spears have no eyes at this time? Yi Shiwen, no matter what reason you have killed a fellow disciple. The rules of the sect cannot be broken. When the Kerfurst Road is over, I will personally suppress you for 1,000 years. Do you have any objections? At that moment, a majestic voice rang out. It came from a ball of flames on the other throne. This person was none other than the master of the Flame Lord, Flame Burst King. I have no objections. Yi Shiwen cupped one hand in the other across his chest and said. After thinking for a while, he realized that the explosive Flame King was trying to protect him. After all, he had made such a big mistake, and merely being suppressed for 1,000 years was already considered lenient. In the eyes of many people, there was no difference between punishing him or not punishing him. Most importantly, many of his secrets had been exposed in the Kerfurst Road. When the time came, he could not only consolidate his cultivation, but also hide from the public at the same time. It was killing two birds with one stone. Humph! Martial King Ding snorted coldly. His figure instantly disappeared from the throne. After Martial King Ding Tian, everyone also turned into a ball of spiritual energy and disappeared. Chapter 2596. This time's interrogation could be said to be a daunting experience without any mishaps. Yi Shiwen had already expected this, but he still felt slightly relieved, because he couldn't guarantee that there would be no variables. If King Dingwu wanted Yi Shiwen to die with Jun Dingtian, then he would have no choice but to leave his hometown. Big brother, at least those old guys haven't lost their minds and put the blame on you. Young Kun Peng came to Yi Shiwen's side and said angrily, Otherwise, I'll swallow them all. In the eyes of everyone, he was fierce and arrogant. Ordinary people couldn't get close to him at all. There weren't many people who could move him now, and Yi Shiwen was one of them. His eyes flickered with sharpness. This was no joke. Back in the day, the demon master Kun Peng could swallow the heavens and the earth, and cultivated a supreme technique. Even the legendary Tao Tai, which was said to be able to swallow everything, had to retreat in front of the Kun Peng's powerful teeth. You only know how to eat, Yi Shiwen said, annoyed and amused. After so many years, young Kun Peng still hadn't changed much. Big brother, what are you going to do next? Young Kun Peng said, There are many people looking for you outside. Why don't you stay here? This is a secret base in the Hidden Valley, and people outside won't know about it. This time, Jun Dingtian didn't inform you, so don't worry. No, I want to leave the Kerfurst Road. Yi Shiwen shook his head. What? Big brother, you want to leave the Kerfurst Road? Don't you want the legendary opportunity? Young Kun Peng was shocked. He never thought that Yi Shiwen would give up the legendary opportunity and leave the Kurfürst Road. Could it be that the things that happened to him recently had shaken his confidence? Yi Shiwen nodded and said calmly, "What's so strange about it? I didn't enter the Kurfürst Road for any opportunity. From the beginning to the end, I don't believe that the opportunity to become an emperor can be given by someone. My path is under my feet, and I can only walk it by myself." "Big brother, you found the reincarnation grass." Young Kuan-peng suddenly realized. He was not stupid, so he immediately realized. He was one of the few people who knew why Yi Shiwen entered the Kurfürst Road. There was no other explanation for Yi Shiwen's unusual decision to leave the Kurfürst Road except that he had found the reincarnation grass. Yi Shiwen nodded with a smile. "I forgot to tell you about this. I killed 2 birds with 1 stone in the secret territory where I killed Jun Dingtian. I found the reincarnation grass and got rid of Jun Dingtian, who was my mortal enemy. Then I'll leave too. Since you're leaving, there's no point for me to stay." Young Kuan-ping said immediately. He patted him heavily and said, "I'm leaving the Kurfürst Road because her situation can no longer be delayed." "Why are you leaving? You still have to continue to hone yourself." Although the Kurfürst Road is only open for a short time, it is a great place to hone yourself. In a short time, if you want to catch up with those monsters who have been practicing for hundreds of thousands of years, millions of years, or even millions of years, is there any other place other than the Kurfürst Road? Young Kuan-ping looked at Yi Shiwen with an aggrieved look. There was nothing else he could do. "And now, I also feel that the great calamity that Yi Wudi mentioned is unusual. The signs are already very obvious. In the future great calamity, even the king-level powerhouses can't guarantee their own safety, let alone you and me. Before the great calamity arrives, every bit stronger your cultivation will increase the guarantee of your safety in the future. I don't need to say more about this. You should understand this yourself." Yi Shiwen said again, "All right, there are only a few hundred years left anyway. Time will pass in the blink of an eye. Just wait and see. When the time comes, I will also appear out of nowhere and make everyone look at me in a different light." Young Kuan-peng laughed heartily again. The sorrow of separation was quickly forgotten by him. "Remember, be careful. The tallest tree in the forest will be destroyed by the wind. Now that I'm not here, you're the most obvious target in the Hidden Valley. You'd better think of a way to break into the peak of the Sage Plain in a short time. When you meet those monsters, even if your skills are too low to defeat them, you'll at least be able to protect yourself." Yi Shiwen reminded him. He had fought with Wu Zimo before and knew how terrifying those monsters were. Back then, if he had not used the Sword of Avicii to severely injure Wu Zimo, he might have died at Wu Zimo's hands. The power of experts at that level was no joke. Ordinary sages at the pinnacle of the Sage Plain were like toys before them. Wu Zimo had slaughtered 99 sages at the pinnacle of the Sage Plain in order to find his whereabouts, and he had only succeeded after setting up the blood sacrifice matrix. It was an astonishing feat. Yi Shiwen estimated that with his current strength, he had far surpassed ordinary experts at the peak of the Sage Plain. However, compared to experts at Wu Zimo's level, he still seemed to be a little weaker. When his cultivation broke into the peak of the middle stage of the Sage Plain, his skills would be incomparably strong, and he should be able to fight. If he went any higher, he would touch the king-ranked realm. It was a power that was impossible to touch in the Kurfürst Road. Therefore, Yi Shiwen did not care whether he was in the Kurfürst Road or not. The Great Confucian Gaul was enough to push his skills to the peak of the middle stage of the Sage Plain. It would be the same no matter where he was. "Yes." Young Kuan-ping nodded with a serious expression this time. He did not respond with a laugh. In their generation, perhaps only Yi Shiwen had the experience of fighting and winning against those monsters. No one could take his words lightly. In that case, there is no time to lose. I guess many people are already on their way to the Kurfürst Road. I have a feeling that if I continue to stay, it is very likely that I will be tricked by them regardless of the cost. It is better to leave first. Take care." Yi Shiwen looked at young Kuan-ping. "I will leave first." As he spoke, his figure had already disappeared from the entire secret zone. In the blink of an eye, he had already flown millions or tens of millions of miles away. Big brother, just you wait. I will definitely shock you. When the time comes, young Kuenping's body exuded a chaotic aura. Behind him, a yin-yang scroll unfolded. Kuenping and Kuenping, two peerless ferocious beasts, transformed and attached to the yin-yang scroll. They were respectively the eyes of the yin and yang power. They kept spinning and actually turned into traces of chaos. There was a fish in the northern underworld called Kuen, which transformed into a bird called Peng. The two ferocious beasts that Kuenping transformed into represented the two powers of yin and yang, respectively. When the two powers of yin and yang began to fuse into chaos, it became another powerful force. It was a chaotic force that was even above yin and yang. At the same time, it also meant that he had already begun to touch the power of the king-ranked realm. If his yin and yang power completely turned into chaos, it would be the time when he would truly become a king-ranked realm. If Yi Shiwen saw this, he would also shout that it was unfair. He did not have any extraordinary bloodline. Every step forward, he had to rely on his great wisdom and perseverance to open up a path that belonged to him. Young Kuenping had the bloodline of the demon master Kuenping. Every step had been opened up by many predecessors. As long as he cultivated step by step, he would be able to achieve shocking results. Of course, there were very few people in the world who could cultivate step by step to the king-ranked realm. Kuenping was one of the few. It was precisely because of such a change that young Kuenping had the confidence to give Yi Shiwen a huge surprise when the time came. Of course, Yi Shiwen did not know that young Kuenping had already touched the stage where yin and yang turned into chaos. He only continued to rush out of the Kerfus Road. Along the way, he could already see many experts from the indefinite divine church rushing over. Many experts from the vassal sects rushed over to the deepest part of the Kerfus Road to capture Yi Shiwen. However, they never expected that Yi Shiwen did not stay in the Kerfus Road. On the contrary, he directly left the Kerfus Road. Most of the time, they did not even know that he had passed by them. Yi Shiwen rushed at full speed, and it took him almost half a month to return to the Yin-Du Sky that he had been to before. He stayed in the Yin-Du Sky for a while. Before he left, Yi Shiwen wanted to see the little guy Zihongyun. Over the past few hundred years, the only one who had crossed paths with him was the Z family of the Yin-Du Sky. He also had a special affinity with the little guy Zihongyun. He did not know if the little guy's physique had improved over the past few hundred years. The next time he saw him might be 100,000 years later. At that time, it would really be ashes to ashes and dust to dust. Thinking of this, he did not hesitate and directly flew towards the Yin-Du Sky. However, he had only flown for less than half of the distance when he encountered a fight. He had encountered such fights almost every now and then, so it wasn't worth paying attention to. However, there was an acquaintance of his in the middle of the fight. Blood Elf Bill. After not seeing him for hundreds of years, Bill's appearance did not change at all. He was still extraordinarily handsome. It seemed that his race was born this way. However, at this time, Bill looked rather disheveled. At this time, he was commanding a group of experts to besiege an mountain pangolin armored beast. After not seeing him for hundreds of years, his cultivation had improved again, and he had stepped into the advanced immortal level. However, this little bit of improvement was naturally nothing in Yi Shiwen's eyes. The hundreds of subordinates that he brought with him were all experts at the peak of demigod level. They formed a large formation and trapped the mountain pangolin armored beast within it. The mountain pangolin armored beast was also constantly struggling. Its fierce aura surged into the sky, and there was a faint aura of a Qilin. Bill was the main attacker, but he was constantly being pushed back by the mountain pangolin armored beast. He seemed to be on the verge of collapsing. Chapter 2597. Yi Shiwen was very keen, and almost at a glance, he could see that this mountain pangolin armored beast had a trace of Qilin's bloodline. Although it was only a little bit of mythological beast bloodline, but it was enough to make this demon beast stand out from the other demon beasts. Although it could not be compared with a real Qilin, but it could also be regarded as a Qilin beast. The scales on its body were the scales of a Qilin. Although the Blood Elf's bloodline was good, but compared with a real Qilin, there was no comparison at all. Although there was a similar realm difference, but Bill was beaten by the mountain pangolin armored beast. And if it was not for the formation of the other demigod-level warriors, perhaps this group of people would have been defeated long ago. And in the center of the formation, Bill was struggling to deal with the attacks of this mountain pangolin armored beast, and it could be said that he had exhausted all his strength. He thought that it would be a simple matter, but in the end it was not like this at all. He steeled his heart and was about to use his trump card. If it was not for this trump card, he would not have dared to casually attack the mountain pangolin armored beast. After all, in this area, it could be said that the wind and rain of the mountain pangolin armored beast could be said to be the king of this area. If it was not for this mountain pangolin armored beast's heart, he would not have come to provoke such a difficult opponent. If he let this opponent escape, there would be endless troubles in the future. Just thinking about it made him feel that it was really too dangerous. And just when he was about to attack, suddenly, a figure suddenly appeared in the center of the formation without any warning. He suddenly turned pale with fright. One must know that the formation he had arranged could be said to be as solid as a rock, and even the fierce mountain pangolin armored beast could not break it. And it was also smashed to the point that it was bleeding. But this figure suddenly appeared without any warning, and this could not help but make him shocked. But when he saw clearly the appearance of this person, he was suddenly stunned. The appearance of this green mountain youth had faintly integrated with the appearance of the purple-robed youth, and it unexpectedly made him dumbfounded. Boom! Although this mountain pangolin armored beast was in the form of a wild beast, it was extremely intelligent. How could it let go of such a rare opportunity? It immediately spat out a mouthful of Qilin flames. Sure enough, just as Yi Shiwen had expected, this pangolin armored beast indeed had the bloodline of Qilin. Although it didn't have much bloodline in the beginning, but with the continuous improvement of its cultivation, it had continuously purified the bloodline in its body. Now, half of its bloodline was Qilin's, and some unique signs of Qilin had also appeared. For example, the Qilin flame was a type of innate breath that belonged exclusively to the Qilin. Not good! Bill immediately turned pale with fright. Just as he was about to use his trump card in a flurry, he saw the figure point a finger, and the mighty Qilin flame was completely destroyed. At this moment, Bill could finally confirm that the person in front of him was the purple-clothed youth that he had met hundreds of years ago. Although it seemed a little different, the domineering figure was still the same. He had seen the scene of Yi Shiwen's attack in the past. That appearance was still unforgettable. "Why are you in trouble again?" Yi Shiwen couldn't help but ask with a smile. It was rare to see an old friend, so he was in a good mood. "Senior, thank you for saving my life," Bill quickly said in a respectful manner. He didn't dare to judge the age and strength of the person in front of him based on his appearance. For him, it was difficult to deal with the Qilin flame in a flurry. However, the man in front of him could extinguish it with just a finger. The gap between them was simply like heaven and earth. "It's nothing. Let me help you get rid of this beast first." Yi Shiwen brandished his sword. He didn't see any superfluous movements. There wasn't even any earth-shattering power. It was just a simple sword slash. The pangolin armored beast didn't even have time to dodge, and it was directly pierced through. The huge body that was like a small mountain directly fell to the ground heavily. The whole ground shook violently, as if it had encountered an earthquake. Bill was still fine. After all, he had seen the grand scene of Yi Shiwen's attack. However, the others had never seen Yi Shiwen. So, when they saw that Yi Shiwen easily killed the pangolin armored beast that they couldn't defeat, they were almost scared to death. Although they were only demigods, they were very clear about the mysteries of many gods. For example, Bill was a god, but it was obvious that there was a huge gap between him and the young man in front of them. Today was the first time they truly and intuitively realized that there was a huge gap between the gods. They were not on the same level at all. Fortunately, this senior seemed to know Bill and was acquainted with him. They were not enemies. Otherwise, they might have been forced to surrender today. Although Yi Shiwen didn't reveal any aura, they didn't dare to be presumptuous. In their hearts, They naturally didn't dare to think that Yi Shiwen was just a superficial appearance. It could only be that their strength was not enough to sense the strength of this senior. What are you waiting for? Hurry up and take this beast away. Bill still knew a little about Yi Shiwen's temper. He quickly scolded his subordinates who were still in shock. I haven't seen Senior for many years. Senior's cultivation has progressed so much. It's really gratifying, Bill said in a flattering manner. In fact, how could he know whether Yi Shiwen's cultivation had progressed or not? He couldn't see the depth of Yi Shiwen's cultivation with his current strength. He couldn't see the depth of Yi Shiwen's cultivation at that time. Now, he couldn't see the depth of Yi Shiwen's cultivation. Therefore, he couldn't say whether Yi Shiwen had progressed or not. However, he wasn't wrong in saying this. After all, no one would dislike hearing such flattering words. Yi Shiwen smiled and didn't say anything. He looked at those demigods hurriedly putting the pangolin armored beast into the storage space. Then he said, "How is that little guy Hong Yin now?" Bill was delighted in his heart. He didn't know what Yi Shiwen's true cultivation was. However, it was always a good thing that such a senior expert was concerned about his young master. Young master is doing very well now. It's just that he often misses senior. Bill answered carefully. Yi Shiwen nodded. It seemed that Zi Hongyun should have a considerable cultivation now. Otherwise, a few hundred years would be equivalent to several lifetimes for a human. Senior, it's rare for you to come here. I don't know if you can do me the honor of visiting the Zi family. Young master will be very happy if he knows that Senior has come. Our master didn't get to thank Senior properly last time. It's a pity. Bill looked at Yi Shiwen and carefully rejected the invitation. Lead the way. Yi Shiwen had such a thought in mind. So, he didn't decline anymore. Yes, Bill immediately said with great joy. He quickly led the way in front of Yi Shiwen and led him directly in the direction of Yin City. After a full 10 days, their group finally rushed back to Yin City. Their speed was naturally not comparable to Yi Shiwen's. Otherwise, it would only take 1 day. Yin City hadn't changed much compared to hundreds of years ago. However, it was different from when he first came here. In just a few hundred years, Yi Shiwen actually had an illusion that things remained the same, but the people had changed. Where's Brother Wen? Yi Shiwen and the others had just arrived at the entrance of Yin City when they heard the anxious voice of a teenager. They saw a teenager in purple clothes rushing over with a hurried look on his face. Yi Shiwen immediately guessed that Zi Hongyun should have received the news one step ahead and rushed over. Although he was completely different from when he was a child, Yi Shiwen could still easily recognize him from his eyebrows. However, what made Yi Shiwen a little surprised was that this little guy's eyebrows hadn't developed when he was a child. So, he couldn't see it clearly. However, looking at him now, this little guy actually looked 50 to 60% similar to him. However, compared to Yi Shiwen, who was just delicate and pretty, this little guy looked much more handsome. At first glance, it was possible that he had mistaken him for someone else. Yi Shiwen was a little surprised. Why did he get along so well with this little guy in the beginning? Perhaps it was because of their similar appearance. Yi Shiwen took a while to confirm that it was the little guy. However, the little guy immediately recognized Yi Shiwen. Brother Wen, it's great. We meet again. At this time, the little guy had grown into an elegant young man, and his cultivation was not shallow. He had truly stepped into the great sage realm. Such cultivation was not slow. It seemed that it was only a matter of time before he stepped into the transcendent realm. You've grown taller. Yi Shiwen compared his waist. At that time, the little guy only reached his waist. The little guy was a little embarrassed immediately. He seemed to have thought of that time. There was a little blush on his face, and then his face turned pale. Yi Shiwen immediately wrinkled his brows. He could see through it at a glance. The curse on this little guy's body hadn't been removed yet. He had merely sealed it with a seal. In addition, his own cultivation was constantly growing, so he was barely able to suppress it. Once the little guy's emotions fluctuated a little, it would immediately cause the curse to become active again. Yi Shiwen immediately stretched out his hand. A mass of spiritual power cultivated by Phoenix regeneration technique poured into the little guy's body, and the curse was immediately suppressed. Yi Shiwen's current magic power was too overbearing. and eradicating that curse was just a matter of minutes. However, this curse had completely fused with the little guy, and if it was eradicated, then the little guy would also die. Therefore, he could only use Phoenix regeneration technique to suppress it. At the same time, it could also repair some hidden injuries and old diseases in his body. The little guy was much better immediately. He stopped panting immediately, and his face returned to calmness. Bill was secretly surprised when he saw this scene. He knew very well how many experts had been invited to treat the young master's illness over the years, and many experts were capable of sealing the curse. However, Yi Shiwen was able to suppress the curse with ease. This was unprecedented. Chapter 2598. As the saying goes, when an expert makes a move, there's only one way to go. As soon as Yi Shiwen made a move, Bill could immediately judge that the cultivation of this cyan-clothed senior in front of him had probably advanced a step compared to hundreds of years ago. It should be known that hundreds of years ago, he could not so easily suppress the curse in the young master's body without any repercussions. It was enough to show that during this period of time, Yi Shiwen had probably become stronger. At this time, Zi Hongyun did not think so much. He only felt at this moment that he had never felt so comfortable. Although he could now barely suppress the curse in his body with his own cultivation, he could not experience any fluctuations. Otherwise, it might immediately relapse, and he was always in a state of oppression. He had never felt so much more relaxed as soon as Yi Shiwen made a move. However, he also knew that he could only rely on his own cultivation to slowly get rid of this illness. If others could get rid of it, they would have done so a long time ago. Even so, he was already very satisfied because he knew that he wouldn't be able to live for long according to the diagnosis of those great figures. He was already very satisfied to be able to live until now. Brother Wen, come with me. My father was also very happy after knowing that you came. Zi Hongyun stepped forward and said hurriedly, Your father? Yi Shiwen frowned slightly. Originally, Yi Shiwen's plan was only to visit Zi Hongyun. He did not want to see other people of the Zi family. But now that Zi Hongyun had said so, Yi Shiwen would not object. The group passed through the entire Yin City and directly entered the old residence of the Zi family in the depths of Yin City. In the eyes of ordinary people, there might be no abnormality at all, but in Yi Shiwen's eyes, it could be said that the entire sky was covered with a huge barrier that enveloped the entire old residence of the Zi family, many of which were arranged by the deities. It was not an accident that the Zi family was able to dominate the Yin City, but it was because they had great strength. The strength that the Zi family possessed was probably comparable to the ordinary first-rate sections. Of course, due to the restrictions of the Kerfus Road, it was impossible to reach the level of the King's sections. When the group just arrived at the gate, a middle-aged man in a purple robe was already waiting at the gate. When everyone saw each other, they were a little stunned. This was because Yi Shiwen, Zi Hongyun, and that purple-robed middle-aged man looked very similar to each other. They didn't look 100% alike. However, there was still a 40 to 50% resemblance between them. Bill thought of this at this time and felt even more strange. Zi Hongyun and that purple-robed middle-aged man resembled each other. After all, they were father and son. But what was going on with Yi Shiwen? The purple-robed middle-aged man was the first to react. He cupped his hands and said, I am Hongyun's father. Thank you for saving me. May I know who you are? The purple-robed middle-aged man saw that Yi Shiwen looked very similar to himself and couldn't help but have some doubts. He was afraid that there might be some kind of conspiracy behind this. After all, Yi Shiwen had helped his son for no reason at all, and now he had come out on his own after hundreds of years. This didn't seem right. Although it was wrong for him to suspect his benefactor, his many years of experience told him that there was no hatred or love for no reason. The Zi family was a big family, so he had to be careful. Yi Shiwen paused and hesitated for a moment. He knew that there might be a lot of people chasing after him now. He wasn't afraid that the Zi family would come after him because they knew his name. If they did, they would be courting death. What he was worried about was that if Wu Zimo and the others knew that he had once established a foothold here, it would bring a disaster to the Z family. Wu Ziyu died in his hands. Based on Wu Zimo's character, he would definitely not let it go. Yi Shiwen's paws fell into the purple-robed, middle-aged man's eyes, and he became even more suspicious. Could it be that Yi Shiwen really came with bad intentions? If so, it wouldn't be good. I am Yi Shiwen. After thinking about it, Yi Shiwen decided to say his name. He had already noticed the other party's suspicious eyes. Anyway, he didn't have anything to hide, so he naturally couldn't care about it at this time. What? The purple-robed, middle-aged man was shocked. He even had tears in his eyes. Previously, he only knew that Yi Shiwen was called Brother Wen from his son, but he didn't know what his full name was. But he didn't expect that it would be such a name. This name was not unfamiliar. It could even be said that he couldn't be more familiar. Recently, among all kinds of rumors, his affairs alone occupied more than half. Even if the Z family was only a native in the Kurfürst Road, they couldn't help but pay attention to it. But the real reason that made his eyes full of tears was nothing else, but that he had a son who was also called Yi Shiwen. But that was something that happened thousands of years ago. According to normal circumstances, his son who was wandering outside should have already died. According to the martial arts level of a Yuan sect, even if his son cultivated to the peak, he would only have a lifespan of 1,000 years. So he really gave up and didn't look for him. He poured all his feelings into his only son. Although he hadn't verified it yet, he had already confirmed that it was Yi Shiwen again. At the same time, this appearance was very similar to his younger self. Zi Hongyan was a little puzzled. His father had always been extremely dignified. He didn't show his emotions. How could he be so excited when he heard a name? Yi Shiwen was also confused. Even if he had become very famous recently, there was no need for tears to flow down his face. Suddenly, a thought flashed in his mind like lightning streaking across the night sky, and he couldn't get rid of it. He suddenly had a guess in his heart. Could it be that he is the biological father of this body, Yi Junshan? Thinking of this, the feelings that he had suppressed for a long time suddenly surged to his brain. He even had a feeling of tears unconsciously. Yi Shiwen turned his palm, and a jade pendant appeared in his hand. He asked, "This jade pendant?" His voice was a little trembling, as if he was very eager to get the answer he wanted in his heart. Yes, yes. You are really my one? Yi Junshan hugged Yi Shiwen in his arms, and his expression was extremely excited. In his heart, Yi Shiwen should have been a dead man long ago. Perhaps if Yi Shiwen had descendants, it might have been passed down for several generations, but he didn't expect that he could suddenly see his long-lost biological son here today. When he first heard Yi Shiwen's name, it was hundreds of years ago. At that time, Yi Shiwen had just become the top person in the Kurfürst Road. But at that time, he didn't think in this direction at all. He just thought it was the same name. After all, he had placed Yi Shiwen in the Yuan school of the true martial world. That place was too remote compared to the 10,000 worlds of the heavens. If he didn't accidentally learn that there was a god's battlefield nearby and went there, he wouldn't have come to true martial realm, let alone met Yi Kongming. The laws of the true force domain were all broken. Even if he cultivated until his death, he would only be in the transcendent realm. It was impossible for him to enter the Kurfürst Road. Although he hoped that Yi Shiwen was his child, his rationality told him that it was impossible. However, he had never expected that the most impossible thing in his heart would actually happen. That world-famous Yi Shiwen was actually his son. Zi Hongyan and Bill on the side were completely dumbfounded. What is this situation? Do these two people know each other before? However, these two people looked at each other and talked in riddles, which made them feel crazy. They couldn't really figure out what their relationship was. At this time, Yi Shiwen also couldn't hide the excitement in his heart. Although he was reborn, he had already integrated into one. The two were originally one, so there was naturally no difference. Moreover, after he returned to Earth, his parents died early, which made him feel extremely regretful, so it was inevitable that he regarded Yi Junshan as his father. At this time, he couldn't tell whether it was the feelings of the original owner or his own feelings, or both mixed together. It was just that he was still confused. There were a lot of unsolved mysteries. The news he got from the Yi family of the ancient wilderness was that Yi Shukong joined the demon realm, but Yi Shuwen did not find any news about Yi Shukong in the demon realm. In fact, Yi Shuwen had traveled to many worlds, but he had never gotten any news about Yi Junshan. Even he himself thought that Yi Junshan had actually been killed by the demon realm at that time. Although Yi Junshan was a famous genius, with his strength at the time, joining the demon realm would only lead to death. If he wanted to survive, perhaps he could only join the demon clan like what the Yi family said. For Yi Shiwen, even if he joined the demon clan, even if he was stabbed in the back, it was better than passing away. With what Yi Shiwen had done for the ancient wilderness, even if Yi Junshan really joined the demon clan, it was not a big deal. And what he never expected was that Yi Junshan would actually appear in the Kerfus Road. Just as Yi Junshan was extremely surprised by how Yi Shiwen broke through the real martial realm and became the so-called strongest person of the present age, he was also extremely puzzled about why Yi Junshan appeared in the Kerfus Road. What's more, he also became the master of the Z family of Yindu and gave birth to Zi Hongyun. He was extremely puzzled. It was not that he didn't have doubts in his heart. After all, this little guy was too congenial with him, and he looked so similar. Having cultivated to this level, he had long understood that there was no hatred for no reason, and there was no love for no reason. There must be a connection that he couldn't figure out. It was just that the little guy's surname was Z instead of Yi, so he just thought that it was probably just the appearance. Chapter 2599. However, the two of them never expected that the most impossible speculation would turn out to be the truth. Both of them had too many questions in their hearts. It was just that these questions were all gathered together. There were so many things that they didn't know where to start. Come, Onion, come here. Let me introduce you. This is your elder brother, Yi Shiwen. Yi Junshan stepped forward and pulled Zi Hongyun's hand, pointing at Yi Shiwen. Zi Hongyun and Bill were shocked. They looked at Yi Junshan at a complete loss because this news was too shocking for them. This was especially true for Zi Hongyun. Ever since he was born, he had never heard that he had a big brother. Now that such a big brother had appeared out of nowhere, even though this person was Big Brother Wen, who he admired the most, he still found it hard to accept. This news was really too shocking. It was a little bit subversive of his perception. Big elder brother. Zi Hongyun was still a little confused. He didn't know what happened, but in general, he didn't reject Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen and he were very congenial. On the other hand, he was also congenial to Yi Shiwen. Moreover, he was not a child anymore. Naturally, he wouldn't have the feeling of being separated from his parents' love. Moreover, this person was Yi Shiwen, so he didn't reject him even more. It was just that he still didn't know what kind of entanglement there was in it. And Yi Shiwen nodded. At this time, everything was suddenly clear to him. No wonder he felt that Zi Hongyun was so congenial. Faintly, in his eyes, Zi Hongyun had merged with his younger brothers and sisters in his previous life. This was his closest kin. Dad, what's going on? Zi Hongyun couldn't help but ask. You go back first, Yi Junshan said to Bill. This matter was of great importance. He didn't want others to know. If Bill wasn't his confidant, he would probably have the thought of killing him at this time. Yes, master. I will leave first. Bill was still shocked in his heart, but he also knew that it was not suitable for him to stay at this time. But in any case, he was Yi Junshan's confidant. If Yi Junshan suddenly had such a powerful master as his son, wouldn't he also be honored? After Bill retreated, Yi Junshan casually laid a barrier. Although with Yi Shiwen's strength, no one could eavesdrop on him silently, Yi Junshan still did not stop him and listened quietly. Yi Junshan spoke tirelessly this time. Yi Shiwen and Zi Hongyun finally understood the whole story. It turned out that Yi Junshan was extremely talented in the past. He was a famous genius in the entire ancient times. Later on, he met Yi Shiwen's biological mother, Zi Yunman. The two soon fell in love with each other. Later, they even became husband and wife. After that, Yi Junshan learned that Zi Yunman was actually not an outsider at all, but the eldest miss of the Zi family in Yindu Tianyin City on the Kerfus Road. She was able to leave the Kerfus Road because she had once obtained a talisman left by the Qin Emperor. Back then, the Qin Emperor had used this talisman to enter the Kerfus Road when he was only in the King realm. Otherwise, it was impossible for people in the Kerfus Road to leave the Kerfus Road. They would only be obliterated by the rules of the Kerfus Road. Later, the two quickly got married, and they had Yi Shiwen. However, when Zi Yunman was pregnant, Yi Junshan's former opponent came to him. After a battle, although Yi Junshan defeated the opponent, Zi Yunman was also affected. In the end, her fetus was affected. At that time, they were faced with the problem of saving the mother or the baby. When faced with this problem, Yi Junshan chose to save the baby, but Zi Yunman insisted on saving the baby. They missed the best opportunity in the stalemate. Although Yi Junshan couldn't persuade Zi Yunman to save the baby in the end, Yi Shiwen, who had affected the fetus, was congenitally deficient. If it weren't for Yi Junshan's desperate input of power to improve Yi Shiwen's physique, he might not survive the first 10 days. But because of this, Zi Yunman was already in a critical condition. At that time, Yi Junshan could only choose to hand Yi Shiwen to Yi Kongming in a hurry because both mother and son were extremely weak at that time, and the talisman could only save one of them. Therefore, Yi Junshan could only choose to leave Yi Shiwen to Yi Kongming, who he had made friends with in the true martial realm, and he returned to the Kerfus Road with Zi Yunman. After the talisman protected the two to enter the Kerfus Road, it completely collapsed and could not be used, so Yi Junshan was also trapped in it and couldn't leave. Moreover, although Zi Yunman was sent back to the Zi family by him, her situation was not good. Although Zi Yunman's father, the patriarch of the Zi family, suppressed the injury with great spiritual power, it had not improved much. Yi Junshan loved Zi Yunman even more, and he never left her. It was not until hundreds of years ago that Zi Yunman's injury improved. However, Zi Yunman, who lost her son, had been depressed and immersed in the pain of losing her son. In order to make her happy, Zi Hongyun was born. Unexpectedly, Zi Yunman was cursed by the enemies of the Zi family again. Zi Hongyun's fate was full of misfortune since he was born. Yi Junshan was really worried. In order to make the power of the Zi family work for him and find a way to save Zi Hongyun, Yi Junshan even volunteered to marry into the Zi family and become a leader of the Zi family. Yi Junshan looked at Yi Shiwen guiltily. In this series of changes, Yi Shiwen was equivalent to being abandoned by him. In this sense, he was definitely not a qualified father, especially at that time, when faced with the choice of protecting the elder or the child. He chose to protect the elder. He did not choose to hide, but told Yi Shiwen frankly. Even if Yi Shiwen did not choose to forgive him, he had no regrets. As long as he knew that Yi Shiwen was still alive, and he was living well, it was enough. Zi Hongyun finally understood at this time what happened in the past. The fate of these two brothers was full of misfortune since they were born, but compared with him, Yi Shiwen seemed to be more miserable. At least he still had his father by his side. Even in the darkest times, he did not lack the care of his parents. On the other hand, this big brother of hers was wandering outside and was even abandoned by her father. If she were in his shoes, how terrible would she feel? Yi Shiwen was silent, and he felt a little uncomfortable in his heart. It was the feelings from the original owner. He knew that he was not Yi Kongming's biological son when he was very young. So in many times, he would also silently think about what kind of people his parents would be, and whether they would also miss him on the other side of the starry sky. But now he got this somewhat cruel truth. Although it was a last resort, he did choose to be abandoned. In order to save his mother, Zi Yunman, his father chose to protect the elder. At that time, his father's mentality was definitely not comparable to his mother. It could be seen from the fact that his father was willing to stay by his mother's side for thousands of years. He was even willing to marry into the Zi family for this. Yi Junshan's talent was naturally needless to say. When he was in the Barrens, he was already a world-shocking master. Now thousands of years had passed, and he had actually entered the Sage Late realm unknowingly. He was not far from truly entering the Sage Peak realm. Even compared with those geniuses in the world, Yi Junshan was not worse. This was because he spent most of his time with his mother, and he was entangled by all kinds of mundane affairs of the Zi family. He was not like those people who concentrated on cultivation. If he concentrated on cultivation, his current achievements would probably be even more limitless. From his own point of view, he was indeed qualified to complain about Yi Junshin's choice. But what could he complain about? In some people's hearts, children were even more important than partners. But obviously, in Yi Junshin's heart, Yi Shiwen and Zi Hongyun might not be more important than Zi Yunman. It was not that Yi Shiwen and Zi Hongyun were not important to him, but Zi Yunman was more important to him. Big brother, please forgive father. In any case, father had no choice. He did this to save mother. Zi Hongyun pulled the corner of Yi Shiwen's clothes and said, on one side was his father, and on the other side was his most respected brother Wen. Both of them were the most important people to him. He did not want the two of them to be strangers in the future. They were father and son. What not could not be solved. Yi Shiwen patted Zi Hongyun on the shoulder, suddenly smiled, and said, you are right. No matter what, it is over. Now we are all living well. This is enough, isn't it? He just felt a little melancholy for a while, and then he completely got over it. Perhaps he still could not really let go, but he could fully understand that kind of helpless choice. Since he could not let go, then let him get over it completely. Shouldn't we always look forward to the future? Great! Zi Hongyun jumped 3 feet high, and the joy on his face was overflowing. And Yi Junshin's tense face finally showed a smile. Good, good, good. He could only say that it was good, but he couldn't say anything else. Maybe it was because he was too excited, or maybe it was because he, as a father, felt that he owed too much to this son. He still didn't know what to say. Compared with Zi Hongyun, he did owe Yi Shiwen more. Yi Shiwen didn't have the mood to care about anything. In any case, they were his biological father and mother. This karma had already been born long ago. There would be no change. Great. Now that big brother has returned, mother will be very happy if she knows about this. Let's go. Let's go see mother. Zi Hongyun pulled Yi Shiwen and Yi Junshan and eagerly walked into the ancestral house. Both Yi Shiwen and Yi Junshan also let him pull them into the ancestral house. Chapter 2600. Yi Junshan and Yi Shiwen went directly into the depths of the Zi family's ancestral house under Zi Hongyun's hand. The entire Zi family's ancestral house was extremely grand. Compared to what it looked like from the outside, there were many mysteries that were not known to outsiders. The sky was very dazzling. Even at night, it was still bright day and night. Many disciples were coming in and out everywhere. Talismans with the word longevity could be seen everywhere. It was very festive. Is someone celebrating a birthday? Asked Yi Shiwen. It's a coincidence that you came back at the right time. Today, the one celebrating the birthday is none other than your grandfather. He is going to celebrate his 1,000,000th birthday. At that time, the entire Yin, Du Heaven, and even many big sects and wealthy families in the Kurfürst Road will send people to celebrate. Yi Junshan said with a smile. He had a rare happy smile on his face, which made many people who saw him along the way surprised. Most of the time when they saw Yi Junshan, he had a cold face. It was rare to see him so happy. 1,000,000 years old. Even with Yi Shiwen's current cultivation, he couldn't help but be secretly amazed. Sure enough, compared with these senior gods, my qualifications are still far behind. There were some areas where the gap could not be completely made up for with just one's cultivation. You happen to be back today. Just take this opportunity to announce it to the world, said Yi Junshan. Zi Hongyun also nodded excitedly, but Yi Shiwen shook his head directly and said, Father, at this time, it is not suitable for me to be public. After all, although I have made a name for myself, I have also offended some extremely powerful enemies. If they know my relationship with you, they can't do anything to me, but they will come to trouble you. At that time, I really can't absolve myself from the blame, even if I die 10,000 times. Yi Junshan was silent for a while. He was too excited just now. There were many things that he didn't consider, or even so, he didn't want to owe this son, the son that he finally found. You're right. Yi Junshan sighed. His eyes were deep, but he didn't say anything in the end. With his wisdom, how could he not see that Yi Shiwen's heart was not here? Although the Kurfürst road was wide, it could not lock him, a true dragon who had the momentum to soar. He looked very much like himself when he was young. Back then, when he was extremely young, he had already made a name for himself in the Yi clan. At that time, he also had the momentum to soar into the sky. Even the vastness of the ancient desolation could not restrict his future. He was willing to stay on the Kurfürst road because he loved his wife so much that he would rather stay in seclusion for her. However, he could not ask his son to be like him. Originally, he had such a thought. He had hoped that Yi Shiwen could stay. But now, this thought had vanished into thin air. Zi Hongyan naturally did not know that his father had already experienced an internal struggle and change in such a short period of time. Along the way, people saluted the two. Although Yi Junshan married into the Zi family, his status in the Zi family was extremely high. His talent was amazing, and his cultivation was outstanding, which made many people admire him. The three of them kept walking until they arrived at a mansion in the deepest part of the Zi clan's ancestral residence. They went straight into a garden in the backyard, where a beautiful woman in a light blue palace dress was tending to the flower bed. His expression was extremely calm. Seeing the father and son coming in, a smile bloomed on his face. Suddenly, she saw the existence of Yi Shiwen behind her, and she was a little startled because he looked so familiar. He was somewhat similar to the young Yi Junshan. She looked at Yi Shiwen in amazement. This was the inner residence of the Yi family. Generally speaking, even ordinary friends would not be brought here. Seeing the beautiful woman in front of him, Yi Shiwen's eyes were wet. For a while his head buzzed, and he didn't know anything. She only felt a kind of emotion that had been suppressed for a long time in her heart. She couldn't hear clearly how Yi Junshan introduced him. She only saw that Zi Yun Man suddenly became excited. 2 lines of clear tears flowed down uncontrollably. She hugged Yi Shiwen tightly, as if she was afraid that her son, who fell from the sky, would fly away again. After a long time, everyone finally calmed down a little. "Child, I'm sorry." Zi Yun Man just kept wiping her tears and said. She tried to stop the tears from flowing down, but she couldn't stop them at all. Compared to Mount Yi Junshan, Zi Yun Man felt even more guilty. Her first child was also a child with a lot of misfortune. From childhood to adulthood, she had never had a good day. She had never had a joyful time. Over the years, there was hardly a day when she didn't miss her eldest son. Although she knew that he might have been dead for a long time, she still couldn't let it go. If it weren't for her long-term illness in bed, and without the talisman left by Emperor Qin, it would be impossible for her to leave the Kurfürst road again. She would have gone to the true martial realm to find Yi Shiwen. How could she not know her husband's feelings for her? But in addition to being a wife, she was also a mother. These were inevitable. "Mother, don't be sad. I'm unfilial. I failed to be filial. Besides, as the saying goes, the young eagle leaves the nest. It's time to spread its wings and fly high. It can only be regarded as training." "It's nothing," Yi Shiwen said. Zi Yun Man felt a little better in her heart. No matter what, isn't Yi Shiwen alive and well now? She asked about Yi Shiwen's previous life again. Different from what Yi Junshan thought, Zi Yun Man didn't care how much Yi Shiwen had achieved or how famous he was. What she cared about were some trivial things in life. When she was growing up, she couldn't accompany Yi Shiwen. Now, she could only try to learn more about the fun things of his childhood. Fortunately, although Yi Shiwen was not the deity, he remembered these things clearly, but he only picked some fun things to talk about. He had a lot of fun things since he was young. Then, when Zi Yun Man asked him why he came to the Kurfürst road, Yi Shiwen only briefly described his experiences in the past few years. The dangers in it were naturally directly mentioned in the style of the spring and autumn period. Although Zi Yun Man had been bedridden for many years, she was also an influential figure in the past. She was a good couple with Yi Junshan. She had also traveled around the world and experienced many things. She was also a famous young genius of the Zi family at that time. She was known as one of the people who had the greatest hope of entering the Tao validation. How could she not know how difficult it was to kill all the way from the remote place of the true martial domain to the present day? Even the description of 9 deaths and 1 life was an understatement. It was really a dead end. It was just that Yi Shiwen didn't want to mention it. She also understood Yi Shiwen's thoughts and didn't ask much. As long as she knew that he was living well now, then everything was not a problem. It's good that you're fine. It's good that you're fine. Ziyun Man kept repeating this sentence. For her, now the worry of many years was removed in one move. Her face was a little more rosy. She was going to be well soon. The sky gradually dimmed, but after a while, various colors of light flickered in the sky. It was as bright as the day, but it was even brighter than 100 days. You 3, father and son, wait first. I will cook for you. Ziyun Man shouted to the 3 of them. She turned and walked in the direction of the kitchen. Thanks to you today, we have a good meal. Your mother hasn't cooked for a long time, Yi Junshan said with a smile. Seeing that his wife's worry was gone, her spirit was different. Yi Junshan was just watching from the side, and his mood was much better. And I haven't eaten the food made by my mother in the past few years. Zi Hongyun nodded very hard, just like a child who hadn't grown up. However, all the people present were his elders. In their eyes, Zi Hongyun was also a child who hadn't grown up. Yi Shiwen smiled and looked at everything in front of him. He was very emotional in his heart. This used to be the life he yearned for the most in his dreams. Perhaps there were no earth-shattering waves, no wind and rain, but it was the most ordinary and the most unforgettable life. But he knew that such a life did not belong to him. He couldn't live such a life forever. When this matter was over, he would go to the physician king to treat Yi Qianqian. Wait a minute. After you eat, I will take you to see your grandfather, said Yi Junshan. And, said Yi Shiwen, I will wait for grandfather's birthday banquet to end before leaving. Although Yi Shiwen was anxious, he was not anxious to the extent that he couldn't even attend the birthday banquet. So fast. Yi Junshan frowned. Although he felt that the Kurfürst Road would definitely not stop Yi Shiwen, he could still stay for another few hundred years. In any case, the Kurfürst Road would be closed for hundreds of years. It was good to be able to spend hundreds of years with the eldest son. After all, the next time they met might be 100,000 years later. They could only meet once every 100,000 years. This was simply unimaginable for other families. That was too far away. None of the 4 people in the Yi family had such a long life. It was just that Yi Shiwen was leaving too fast. Yeah, brother, why are you leaving so soon? Said Zi Hongyun quickly. It was not easy to recognize this brother. He didn't want to be separated like this. It had not been long since they reunited. Although grandfather's birthday was still a while away, it was not long. Yi Shiwen could not help but smile slightly. If possible, he also hoped to stay a little longer. He was destined to soar in the sky, but it did not mean that he did not need a place like home. It was just that the indefinite spirit cult, Wu Zimo, and many people who coveted his wealth were looking for him. If he stayed here, it would be disadvantageous to his parents and younger brother. Also, Yi Qianqian's injury could not be delayed any longer. The sooner it was resolved, the better. What are you guys talking about? Hurry up and go into the house to prepare for dinner. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.